Great start. I will call the September meeting of the State Board of Education to order. And following our tradition, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming. I'll remind those of you that haven't signed in yet, there is a sign-in sheet circulating, so please sign in. And I think we'll start this morning's meeting by the board introducing itself. I'm Stephen Morris from Newfane, Chair of the State Board of Education.
My name's Lachlan Francis from Putney.
Sean Marie Oler from Bennington. You're in the light.
I know.
Margaret McLean from Peacham.
Mark Parent from Middlebury.
Bill Mathis, Goshen.
Krista Hewling from Jeffersonville.
Stacy Weinberger, Burlington.
Armando Villaseca, Secretary.
Thank you.
And Morgan.
Morgan's
Oh, where's?
for English, my son.
Oh, waiting for toast. That darn toast.
Let the record show that the secretary was not the last person at the table.
Morgan and I had a deal.
Yes. And I think we will go around the room and let people introduce themselves as well. Mark, would you start?
I'm Mark Oppinger, General Counsel of the agency.
Denise Wentz, Allenwood School, Williston. Judy Kaplan, I'm from the University of Vermont.
Bill Remick, Agency of Education.
Carol King, Agency of Education.
Bill Talbot, Agency of Education.
Julie Longchamp, Vermont NEA.
Martha Allen, Vermont NEA.
Travis Kilpatrick, ACT.
Ken Page, Vermont Principal Association.
John Fisher, Agency of Education. Steve Dale, Vermont School Boards Association.
Angela Ross, Agency of Education.
Thank you. Thanks all for coming this morning. We'll go to item B, public to be heard, and I understand we have a presentation from the Vermont School Library Association.
Is
Jill?
there any way we can switch the two, because these folks are set up and the folks in the public to be heard did have a brief PowerPoint? Is that all right?
Sure. Is there other members of the public that wish to be heard this morning? I'm not following Jill here.
Jill, you want Denise to do it first? Is that what you're saying?
No, I misunderstood. I'm sorry. We thought that the public to be heard was after the tell. So the item C is all set up to go, but the public to be heard folks do have a PowerPoint. So we could take the VTEL off and let the public to be heard.
Well, Martha, are you okay going first?
Yeah.
You okay?
Okay.
Yep.
Let's go to item C then, and we'll get a report from Martha Allen. And Juliet, yes? And this is a report on the Tell Vermont survey.
That's right.
And just for the record, would you repeat your names again, please?
Sure. My name is Julie Longchamp from Vermont NEA.
Martha Allen from Vermont NEA. Julie's doing this presentation.
I'm doing the
Say, and introduce
presentation.
yourself. Is this the first time, Julie?
It is the first time. So
So
I am
let's-
the new Director of Professional Programs at Vermont NEA, replacing Sherry Guile, who presented to you last year, introducing the Tell Vermont survey. So I am here to give you the preliminary results.
And we're in uniform.
And we're in uniform.
So just out of curiosity, Julie, you now places, you're now taking her role in.
Exactly.
Everything.
All the
Everything.
areas that she was, okay,
Yes, so a little bit about myself.
good.
I spent 30 years teaching in Vermont schools, starting in a two-room schoolhouse in Belvedere, which is no longer in operation.
Have a nice school, though.
It was well, no, I was actually teaching in the two-room schoolhouse, the
right.
yellow building. So,
Now there's a school with no students in it, right?
exactly. And then I taught for 3 years at Waterbury Elementary, which is no longer Waterbury Elementary. It's Thatcher Brook, so there's kind of a pattern. And then I spent the last 25 years at Williston Central School teaching middle school, and joined Vermont NEA in July. Aside from that, I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Vermont working on my dissertation, so I'm busy. But I'm really enjoying this job. So can everybody see do we want to move so we
Yeah.
can see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'm gonna sit in the back, is that okay?
You're actually part of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, right.
It's all about students. Stay right there, Lachlan.
And would you prefer me sitting? I know you have to have the microphone, but
Whatever you prefer.
I'm fine. I don't want to get in anybody's way, So the Vermont Health Survey, if you recall, I believe Sherry came to you last year and presented it to you, and the agency and the governor's office and Vermont NEA sponsored this survey in Vermont schools. So what I would like to talk about is to review the constructs that were included in the survey. I'm going to go over the preliminary results, some uses that we see for the survey. I'm going to navigate a little bit so you can see how the website with the data can be accessed, and then talk about the next reports that the new Teacher Center, who administered the survey, will be creating this fall. We'll have some question and answers afterwards, but if you have any burning questions, please feel free to ask it as I go along. So one of the elements identified as necessary to transform the teaching profession, signed by all of the stakeholders in the United States, includes this. So I'm going to read this quote. High-functioning systems can amplify the accomplishments of their educators, but a dysfunctional school or district can undermine the impact of even the best teachers. We need schools and districts whose climates and cultures, use of time, approaches to staffing, use of technology, deployment of services, and engagement of families and communities are optimized to continuously improve outcomes for the students they serve. And I want you to keep this quote in the back of your head as we go through the Vermont TEL survey, because that is what the survey measured. Vermont's climate in the climate and teaching conditions and learning conditions in Vermont schools. So there were 8 constructs throughout the survey. One was time, facility and resources, community support and involvement, managing student conduct, teacher leadership, school leadership, professional development, and instructional practices and support. And in the survey, under each construct, were several 8 to 10 statements about each construct. And teachers, administrators, and ESPs rated each statement on a 4-point scale, 1 being disagree, somewhat disagree, and then somewhat agree and agree. What we know about teaching conditions, that it really does matter for kids, and it also matters for teacher retention. We had 55% of Vermont educators and ESPs respond, so 68% teachers, 8% other professionals like SLPs, and other occupational therapists in the school, and 21% of the ESPs, and only 1%, almost 2% of administrators. We had a threshold, so school-based data, if they did not get over 40%, specific school data is not in the survey, so we created that 40% threshold, which you'll see in a moment. But 225 out of 322 schools exceeded that 40% threshold. So our preliminary findings, we have many strengths in our schools. Our class sizes are reasonable in almost 80% of the schools. Our school facilities and resources are strong, except for about 30% of the teachers didn't have access to the internet, which I kind of thought was high. I was thinking that that was going to be lower. I mean, as far as, I think more people would have access. So only 30% felt they had enough technology. Community support and involvement was strong. Teachers are encouraged to try new things to improve instruction, so they're allowed to be innovative in their schools. And schools are safe, and students understand expectations for their conduct. But with that came some opportunities for improvement. So under time, only 52% of teachers felt they had enough time to collaborate with colleagues. Teachers are allowed to focus on educating students with minimal interruptions. So still, teachers are having interruptions that are impacting their teaching within the school day. The non-instructional time isn't adequate. So only 56% said that it was adequate for them to actually do their job. Still lots of paperwork, so only 57% felt that there were efforts were made to minimize the amount of routine paperwork. And 61%, and I believe this was an improvement from 2009, teachers are protected from duties that interfere with their essential role of educating students. So these are all areas that we, in this survey, were areas for improvement.
Can I ask
You have a question,
just a
Stacey?
clarifying
Sure.
question before we move? The second one about being allowed to focus with minimal interruptions. Do you have a sense of whether or not people were seeing that as minimal interruptions by fellow students in terms of like student behavior, or minimal interruptions in terms of, and now they have to go to Spanish, and now they have to go to, like, what
Well,
kind of
I took the
interruptions?
survey
Yeah.
because I was a teacher when this was administered, and when I answered this question, I was looking at my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So disruptions to my class. So
Not
if I
not
had
student behavior.
Not student behavior,
student
that's a
That's the
whole
way I
different thing.
answered it,
Yes,
I
that's
took
the way.
survey also, so
Okay.
that's the way I
That's
answered
how it
it.
went through. Okay.
And so thinking about when you have special days and you get pulled out, or picture day, testing days, and all these
Exactly.
interruptions that
Okay.
take away.
I thought that was an important distinction to understand.
So under teacher leadership, the faculty has an effective process for making group decisions. And this came also with parents, that there wasn't, they didn't feel included in the decision-making process. So the three bullets really have to do with teachers having, or the schools having a process that includes teachers in the decision-making.
These percentages are the people who say there were challenges.
They were, no, these were the agreement.
Okay, all
Okay?
right, all right.
So these were the positive
All right.
statements.
Okay,
So subtract it from 100 to get
Right.
the number that.
gotcha.
So opportunities for, school leadership. The faculty and leadership have a shared vision. So only 59% felt that was true. An atmosphere of trust and mutual respect. Teachers feel comfortable raising issues and concerns that are important to them, so 60% agree to that statement. Teachers receive feedback that can help them improve teaching. And procedures for teacher evaluation are consistent. And I know that last one, I'm on the Vermont task force, and I feel when it comes to teacher evaluation, we're creating a new process for teacher evaluation. So hopefully in 2016, the process will be implemented in Vermont schools, and we'll see an increase in that construct. And then professional development. Appropriate amount of time provided for professional development, 65% felt that was true. Professional development being differentiated to meet the needs of individual teachers. So if you have a physical education teacher and a math teacher, and how do you create professional development on those in-service days where all of the teachers' needs are being met. Professional development deepens teachers' content knowledge. 62% believe that was true in their schools. This was an interesting one. We know that this is the year that we're implementing the Common Core state standards, yet only 62% of the teachers in the spring felt that they were prepared to implement the Common Core. So some work to do there. And then follow-up to professional development. When we think about an in-service day where you're learning about something, is there follow-up on that topic so you can deepen your understanding? Only 45% of teachers felt that that was true. And then professional development provides ongoing opportunities for teachers to work with colleagues to refine teacher practices. Only 58% believe that that was true in their schools. And that kind of also aligns with collaboration, so that issue on time. So in thinking about how we're going to use this rich information, it is a baseline for improvement. It's a metric, so it's a number that we can use, and when we administer the survey, hopefully again in 2016, we can actually see some growth in some of these areas that we're impacting or will be impacting in our schools. And it's also a way to prioritize. What are the areas that are most important to teaching and student learning, and highlighting those areas or impacting those areas as a first step. And the goal is to close the achievement gap, to have a climate in our schools where increased learning can happen for students. So another use of data, which will be really important to those schools that are Green Mountain Star schools, is to use them in their school improvement plan. So this, what you see on the screen, is a screenshot of the IndaStar program where school improvement teams have to write at what level they've achieved each of the indicators. And what the New Teacher Center is doing right now is aligning the statements under the 8 constructs that align with the indicators. So this indicator was, I can't read it, had something to do with creating a vehicle to, for everyone's voices to be, so the decision making and how are decisions made, and are everyone's, the parents, communities, teachers' voices heard when making decisions. And there are 3 statements from the TEL survey with a percentage that can be used as evidence. So the box at the bottom where the arrow is pointing is where the school improvement team have to have to write about how they've achieved or achieving each indicator. So this could be a really valuable resource for those school improvement teams. Good data.
And we from the old survey, or the old Green Mountain Star.
2009. Okay.
We made a correlation between, we did the cross, well, actually, New Teacher Center did, but the questions have changed a little bit. So
Right.
they're doing it again. I
They're
think that we
realigning it.
showed that to Secretary Villaseca
Yep.
with
Great.
the old ones.
And that will be up on the on their webpage, which I'm going to show you. So we really hope that schools in Vermont will look at what's working. Where can we celebrate? Look at what's not working, kind of prioritizing those areas. And I'm a big appreciative inquiry person. So looking at, what would be the ideal? What's your dream in your school? And look at creating processes whereby those areas that were weak can be improved to, again, improve student learning. And another really powerful use of this survey is it's a window. We have tremendous resources within our state. We have schools that are doing really great things. But if you are on one side of the state, you know very little about what's happening on the other side of the state. And by looking at the survey, because it's totally open, and you can look at schools that have similar demographics that might be doing something, might be stronger in some areas, and you can make a phone call. So you can look at schools that scored high and contact these schools. And the nice thing is, these are free resources. These are, really, it's a way in which we can share the wealth and our knowledge across schools in Vermont. So I think that's a very powerful use of this data.
And that doesn't cost any money.
Yep. And that's what we want. We want collaboration between schools, and we have some schools that are doing a great job. Yes, Krista.
Is there going to be raw data that comes out by school so we could
I'm
look
going
at
to
that?
show you it. It's
Okay, you are
already
gonna
out.
see that.
Yes. And then once you have those priority areas, developing goals with measurable outcomes. So you can see that what you're doing is working. It's moving your school in the right direction. And again, we want our schools to engage in a continuous improvement model. So creating a system to focus on, to improve certain areas that schools have identified as priority areas, and then creating something measurable to see if it's working. And then again, in 2016, we hope that we'll partner with the agency and the governor's office again, and hopefully the Superintendent's Association and the Principals Association and businesses to administer the survey again, so we can see how what we've done in our schools are actually improving the climate and learning conditions.
Julie, was there an increase in participation since the
Yes,
last
so
time?
I have not gone into the 2009 survey too much, but there was a significant increase, but still not to where we would like it.
We still had the threshold of 40%, and we had 48, I think, percent, something to that.
Met the threshold.
We had 48% participation instead of 40%. I mean, that, yes. Right.
Okay, and how many schools met this threshold of
70% this year.
70%?
So I want to take you to the website itself. So here, this is not all. So this is the Tell Vermont survey.
It's all right here.
Yeah.
I don't know where the,
And the website is tellvermont.org, so anybody can get there.
You can link to it from the paper that you have us,
Yep.
that you sent us.
So there is a historical link, but I want to first show you the tools. In the tools section, there are anybody that wants to, any schools that would like to use this and use the survey and facilitate teachers and community members in using the information. There's actually a facilitator's guide. There's a PowerPoint presentation that will guide a group through the use of the survey that schools can download, and you can tweak the presentation to meet your needs. There is a facilitator's agenda, a participant packet, and all of this is easily downloadable on the site.
You can do it during a staff meeting and come out of a staff meeting with an action plan for one particular, choose a particular question that's challenging in your school and dig down deep into that, and when you walk away, you'll have a plan, an action plan.
So the results are done by school district and then by school. So if you look at the Vermont results, I'm not going to go through them, just showing you where they are so you can look. You have all the constructs, and for some reason it is not, over here would actually be the percentages. I think I might have to change my settings. Where?
There you go. Well, that's,
Yeah, but I'm going to press this. So if I go to Addison Central, it is by school. And if you notice, 4 of the schools did not have the threshold. So only 15% in Ripton. So you're not going to get individual school data for those schools, but you will get district data for those schools. So if you went to Mary Hogan, I have a feeling it's not going to show me. Yeah, it's not moving over for some reason. Okay, let's see.
Shrink the
Yeah,
picture.
I'm trying to.
I'll move you, just move you. Move the screen.
Just be curious what
If you just move your computer,
people see
you'll get rid of the
Yeah, I
white
can't-
on the left, and
see their school affect how
I can't move it. I can't find. I'll just do this.
just physically move you.
Yeah, no, it's not. It just needs to zoom out. Okay. That's okay. We'll get it.
Okay, there you
you
go.
can't
I
read
just,
it, but
I
that's all
really
right.
just want to show you what is there.
What it looks
So,
like.
For each
I'll
one.
go zoom out one more time. So for each school that actually had the 40% threshold, and it's not important for you to see the numbers right now, you have, so here is the construct, and for time, there were 7 statements about time. You'll have, this is Mary Hogan School, this is other Vermont middle schools, so you can compare middle school and middle school. You can compare your school to the district and then to the state. So you can look at where are you above the state, where are you below. And Mary Hogan happens to be a very strong They did really well on many of the constructs that, especially when it comes to decision-making, which came as a weakness, they actually did really strong. So I'd want to know what Mary Hogan was doing to, how they made decisions in their school. So anybody can access any of the information for districts and schools, totally open to the public. And we would encourage you to do so. Any questions just about the website? It's kind of fun to go through it. Yes. Stacy.
I'm just wondering, did you see any preliminary things jump out at you in terms of kind of cross-referencing? Like, did it seem that the smaller school districts expressed more satisfaction, or the larger ones had, like, was there anything that jumped out in terms of how?
Nothing really jumped out as far as small school, large school, which I thought was.
Or a student where there's higher poverty rates or lower. I'm curious whether or not how people perceive their own school, or how they perceive they're seen by the state.
So
That's how people answer the survey.
Some of that information is coming in our next reports, which I'm going to share with you. So the preliminary report is just looking at the data and comparing schools to other schools in their genre and their similar demographics, district and state. But what's happening next is the agency and the new teacher center are communicating right now to create a correlation. So looking at student achievement data, how does that correlate to climate, the school climate in each of the constructs? And also, how does it correlate with teacher and leader retention? So is there less teacher retention in schools that have a stronger climate? Is there less leader retention? We know there's 25% principal retention this year. Is that right, Ken? Something like that. It was 25% for Steve.
Well, it's 75 retention.
Retention, right. So 75%. 25% turnover, which was better than the year before. So I think that's really important data to be looking at, and that will be posted on the Tell Vermont front page sometime this fall.
All the reports will be on there.
Yep.
So you can
And the
just-
preliminary reports, which I believe you have in your packet, are already on for people to look at. So our final thoughts in looking at the survey is we really would like administrators, local educators to use these results to look at what's working, where improvements need to be made, and creating a plan for improvement to make sure that our schools are even better places to work and to learn. This was a significant resource, and using it, we really want it to be used so we can then, in 3 years, administer this again. It should be used, and I think the important thing is we had 6,600 educators that took this survey, and if we don't use it, the message that we're giving to these educators are that it wasn't important. And we don't want that. And I took it, and Krista took it. We think there is some really valuable information, and it's we'd like to see it in school improvement plans, and we'd like to see teachers and administrators and community folks collaborating on what is the most important for your school, what are the most important areas to improve the climate. Yes, Jean Marie?
I may have forgotten from when Sherry presented this, but what was the vehicle that was used to encourage the teachers to take the survey? Was it through NEA leadership? Was it through buildings? I mean, what was the?
I think that's a really good question. I know that for me and for Krista, it was the NEA leadership within the building. I know that the communication, Darren Allen, the communication director, kept sending everybody emails and encouraging people to get that 40% in your school so you could actually get school level data.
It was also for every educator, not just union members.
No,
So
I understand that, but what
we
about
did
principals?
Advertise.
Yeah.
Were the Principals Association involved in trying to get the word out?
Not so much. They didn't stand in the way.
But you
not
only
quite
had
an
like
endorsement.
1% of
Administrators. So that message might not have gotten out that they they could also take the survey. Though they did have numbers, because everybody had code numbers.
Okay, because one of the things is, teachers did it, and you're saying it's a valuable resource, but if it's not on principals' radar screens to use as a resource, then they're not going to organize staff meeting to look at results or
Exactly.
to do that stuff. So it seems like getting principal participation would help
Absolutely.
in the future.
And even now, because the
Yeah.
data is out there now.
Yeah.
And we would like to encourage schools to be using this data to kind of assess their climate and where they can improve. And that's one of the
We were
reasons why
hoping,
we're here.
we were hoping there would be more principal
Participation.
participation, so maybe next time.
Have you gotten feedback as to why that might not be at all?
Why
Any
principals
any
didn't?
formal-
Ken, you want to speak to that?
He wasn't in the room.
He wasn't in the room.
And not just, not just principal, but also, superintendents.
Well, I think part of it was, and Ken, we're talking about why principals didn't participate in the survey, just so you know. I think part of it was that administrators felt as though this would be a criticism of their work. And, which is not the intent.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Granted.
not a criticism, it's, this is the current state,
Right.
Exactly.
and we have a current state for everything.
And I know as
All working to
a
improve.
classroom teacher, when we would do our achievement tests, you look at the results and, for instance, with the fourth grade, I was the third grade teacher, but the fourth grade teacher took it all to heart. And when it was a building of skills that students needed before they took their test at the fourth grade, but the fourth grade teacher would feel that it was all her responsibility, and it's not, it's the school community's responsibility. And I think it's sort of a similar way. You see that, oh, my school is having trouble with facilities, and that's a community effort, not just that one leader. And leadership is one of the constructs. So it's perceptions of the people who take the survey. That's what this is. And if there's a communication problem, if the principal thinks that it's one thing and the teachers answer that it's, feel that it's something else, that means a conversation needs to take place. And perhaps the principal is correct, or perhaps the teachers are correct. Whichever it is, there needs to be a communication. So
And
it's a little bit out of the comfort zone, I think, to some extent, but I think it's worth it in the end.
And the discussions are valuable. And if this is one measure of school climate, and we like multiple measures, but this is one
Right.
strong measure.
Ken, do you have any comment? I realize you're out of the room when this issue came up, but if you do, the board would appreciate hearing from you.
Ken Page, Vermont Principal Association. And first of all, I will say, kudos to these folks for being able to carry through on this. I think that when Sherry and Martha came to the executive council meeting and presented this, I think it was our feeling of our board is that we would support a broad coalition giving a survey, but that as we sort of dug into the survey, and we had fears, and some of those were I guess, carried out, and that folks would immediately take that and say, if the climate's terrible, then it's all the leader's fault. And I will tell you that happened in some occasions. They immediately took it and turned around and said, therefore, we need to change the leader. And so we would support a broad, coalition of folks working on a survey, and that if it were superintendents, principals, school boards, and Vermont NEA on this working as well, I think we'd probably get, more results, better results, and a process that we can work on. If it's one group that's going to do it, and if that survey itself sort of finds its way into teacher negotiations, which it often has, then it's perceived as partisan. And but this doesn't diminish the great effort that these folks have put in, and I think their intentions are honorable. It's just that we need to take a broader look at this than sort of a little slice.
We were fortunate to have the Agency of Education and the Governor's Office supporting this venture.
And hopefully in 2016, we can have that discussion and hopefully have more support from other stakeholders.
Okay, so
Other
that's
questions or comments from board members? Margaret?
So what's happening now to create that broad coalition? So that when 2016 comes along, we're in place to do this collaboratively and have this data, or data, to look at, which tells that full picture.
Although I can't speak for the other organizations, VPA would be very happy to be at the table and get ready for 2016.
Okay, great.
Stephen, Armando.
Armando?
I haven't come, I don't know the, but one of the things, and I will say that, 2 years ago, was it, no, 4 years, when was this?
2009. 4 years.
2009, the agency did not participate in it, and quite honestly, there was a lack of trust between how this information could be used, and why, which is why I, at the time, did not have the agency participate. However, and I was new, I just started, so I wanted to see how these things were working. I think it was the first time, Martha, you guys had done it. But I did not find, I found the information to be valuable. I don't think it was used, as Margaret was saying, as much in the field, but it was valuable. I can't say that it wasn't used in some ways at negotiation table, but I didn't see any of it. So when it came around again, and the relationship that I've built with the Vermont NEA, and Martha and I have both, a professional respect and work with each other, found this to be valuable. I think the governor's office also gave some, so it took me a while to come around, but I did come around, and I find that information now is valuable, especially as we go on the long term. I think the point that Ken's making is one that there is still sometimes that area of distrust, if you will, particularly at the negotiations table, and could this be used against principals in one way? I haven't seen that happen, but the goal would be to have it be more collaborative amongst all the groups, and it doesn't just become a Vermont Tel survey, unless they want it to be that way. I mean, I don't want to speak for Vermont, but it could be, if it was broadened, I think that you would have maybe a broader coalition. But at this point, the agency did provide them with some financial support. I'm looking forward to seeing the results now, because now we're looking at longitudinal data. We have 4 years now. The next one should be even more valuable, because now we start looking long-term. We did have an influence in some of the questions where I was very interested in bullying and harassment areas that needed to be in here, and maybe it needs to expand beyond that as well. But you can't continue to add questions, because, as Martha explained, there's in order to have longitudinal data, you need to have the same questions every year. So from our perspective, I was probably where Ken was 5 years ago. I've come around seeing that this was not being misused, and that I would assume that the future secretary will also support this in whenever it is 4 years or 3 years, whenever it comes up again.
Great, thank you.
Margaret?
I think it's in everyone's interest to have broad range of data beyond test scores to look at schools, and this is a beginning to do that. And I would hope that this time between now and 2016, the Superintendent's Association, Ken said the principals are ready to work, will get over this distrust and work with other organizations to create that atmosphere. If we can't model it on a state level, how do you expect it to happen locally? I mean, we need to set an example of collaboration to bring this broad level of data to everyone's benefit. I hope that can happen.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. I found this very interesting. I got a couple of questions. I took note that most of the responses were at best in the 60% range. Was there great improvement since 2009?
If we answered that, it's about 20% more educators took the survey.
No,
but as
no, no,
far
no.
as
The responses.
Oh,
Do they
that's
feel as though improvement has been made in certain areas?
Yeah.
I have not done that comparison yet to that extent.
I mean, one normally would not consider a 65% favorable rating to
Right.
something very positive.
I think that we're hoping that this survey and the next one will show improvement. The last one that we did. It was brand new. We were just getting our feet wet, just trying to get it to be something that people were aware of. And we did a bunch of trainings in nine different areas in the state for schools and administrators, teachers and administrators, to learn about the data and learn how to use it. And I don't have any record of who actually did that.
And the other number I found very disturbing, and I'm going to put another hat on, I serve on the Vermont Telecommunications Authority Board. And as you know, we're to have broadband and cell service throughout the state by the end of the year. And there was a major federal grant to a Vermont company to provide cell service, namely to public buildings, including schools. So I find it alarming or questionable whether there really are 30% of our schools that are not being served by broadband. If that's true, then we need to do, somebody needs to start working with the VTA and let them know who it is, because that's not the information that we have on that authority.
It also, I'm not sure, but it could be a teacher in a classroom without access. The school might have it, but they might not have it in every classroom or something to that effect. So I'm not sure exactly.
Yep, I
We'd
would
have to
agree.
look more closely at that.
And at least what we have, that number is, that's not the number we have, that, it's a much higher percentage, almost 100% of our schools have
Have
access.
something, but I think
Right.
that, so it might be, I'm stuck in this little corner of the building, and so it doesn't work. Those kind of issues crop up a
Jean-Marie?
lot.
I think part of that answer, and I just looked at this quickly, is that some of the bigger school districts are not in your database. So I can speak for Southern Vermont, where out of 3,000 students and 500 teachers, only 2 schools, the 2 of the smallest schools, appeared on here. So again, I think the trust in leadership, in, I think the ability for the agency to partner with you was a step in the right direction. I think there is, we had a large strike down in Bennington just before this survey went out. It would have actually been nice to partner with the people down there to see what the results would be, but the technology down there is very accessible, and so you wouldn't have answers from one of the bigger school districts.
Yeah, but I agree with Martha that it might be, you have access in the schools, but does that access translate into the classroom? As far as, number of computers in your classroom and actually access to the technology to use the internet.
Just one clarification, when Sean Marie says she can speak for Southern Vermont, she's talking about southwestern Vermont.
Well, let's see, did Southeastern get in there?
Yeah, Wilmington is the demarcation, is that the separation line, is that what it is? Yeah.
That's the dividing line.
Yeah.
Other questions or
I
comments?
bet the East is on here.
No, you said it, you prefaced your.
I did.
Yes. I was
So
just
let's look
correcting
at
you.
results, Stephen.
No, let's move on.
She's gonna be
Any
looking at
other
this one.
questions or comments? Stacy?
I can't resist chiming in on what Margaret said, just to add the emphasis on the, I was a classroom teacher and I was a school director, and it's like the most humbling experience to move from classroom teacher to school director, because all of a sudden you realize all those things that you say, oh, I wish my principal did this and that, and then you're there and you have a wider lens. And I think there's not a right lens or a wrong lens, but I think that if we can't even share a piece of paper, that how are we going to share the process? And I understand for the longitudinal data pieces why you can't change the survey, but I really
Change some of it. But
right. I
there's
think even if there was a section for administrators to add in and a section for janitors and
hoping for
cafeteria
that.
or whoever, because I think if we have to recognize we have different roles within the school.
Exactly.
We have different lenses. But we're all working in the same building or same district, and so, you saw it that way, I see it this other way, and that's the nugget we have to wrestle with. It's not a judgment on Krista's doing a good job or I'm doing a bad job, but we're misinterpreting each other's intentions, and if we can't address that, I think we're really missing the point.
Yeah, those communications, those discussions are valuable. And it's all about continuous improvement.
Yeah.
This is a first step.
Which we all need.
Mark?
So,
We're there.
so in order to move forward, are you looking for something specific from this board?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I am sitting here struggling and wondering where the policy issue comes in here for the board.
Right.
Although I find this information very interesting, don't misunderstand me, but.
In our priorities, we do have some priorities that look at broadening the look of data beyond test scores to other areas. So it could be having broader information about equity issues in schools is really important, and this is one way into that. Yeah.
Yes,
I
Ken?
just wanted to add, one more thing, and that we talked a lot about the need to sort of have a balanced approach. And, I mean, this is great to hear from school employees, instructional assistants and teachers. I think hearing from kids is really important too.
Yep, absolutely.
I think hearing from parents. So when I talk about a balanced approach, I just don't mean between superintendents and school boards and principals. I mean about the full picture. I mean, it's great that employees feel this particular way and that maybe we can attribute it back to climate issues or others. But I'd love to hear what kids have to say. I mean, aren't they the recipients of this education? And I'd love to hear what their parents have to say. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, and I know that we're sort of tied into a lot of like these questions, and gee, we want to be able to compare 2009 to 2013 to 2016. It'd be more important from my end to say, let's get a broad, balanced approach to looking at this. And then I think we can really say with fidelity that we've really looked across all areas, and this is a direction that we should head forward. But, I think that, particularly I know that there's, students on the, board here. I think you'd want to ask, put some questions in that would say, how kids feel about their education and their climate.
I do think that many schools do have that information, Ken. I know in Williston that there is a survey every year that is sent to parents, and that information is actually used on every team as we create our team action goals for the year. And students are also, at the end of the year, given surveys. So I think there may be some schools that do have that data from all of those stakeholders, and I would encourage schools to do so.
Right, as we mentioned, this is one measure. So to have a community, we also have access to a community survey called Keys that is free. This one costs a lot of money, but we have another one that's free if communities are interested in that.
Okay. Armando?
And I think just asking about where the board's role is, I think this is one of those gray areas right now that as a board that now has, and again, the question that we throw around, policy, what does policy mean? You have rules. That is really the only avenue that you have for making anything. So this may be interesting, and it may be informative, and it may make us think, but something that you're gonna have to grapple with as you move forward in the future is, what is your role in this? Are you going to pass a rule that says this will be done? I don't think that's probably a good idea. So again, I'm just not sure, other than information as a board.
Well, I think that's important.
Yeah.
That it is informative.
It's informative, that's what I'm saying. But the
helpful.
question is, the next step, I think that's where it probably becomes a little bit more of a discussion point about what can the board actually do.
However, I can see that, I will only speak for myself, being better informed might make me a better board member.
Yes.
And I'm not speaking for anyone else there.
We
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate the support that you're giving, too.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation and all the good work you do.
Thank you, guys. Martha, Sherry, thank you.
We'll move back to the public to be heard, and understand we have a presentation from the Vermont School Library Association.
It's like 3 or 4 different things on it directly.
Yeah.
However,
Julie, thank you.
Ladies, please reintroduce yourself before you give the presentation.
State is good for our money.
days
I'll
out
just
this week.
give you the cash.
Really, it's gonna be hard. No, it is.
Do you do it for the table?
Yes, I was going to
I should maybe preface this. It's my understanding that you have some comments on, why don't you introduce yourselves first?
Okay.
Excuse my manners.
I am Denise Wentz, and I am the president of the Vermont School Library Association, and I am also a school librarian at Allenbrook School in the Williston School District, and I think it's very interesting that I followed Julie, who started the same year I did at Williston School Districts, and Martha is also has been a school librarian. So Thank you very much for accepting our request to come to your meeting. And this is Judy. Do you want to introduce yourself? Or would you like me to? Sure. Okay, this is Judy Kaplan. She is the coordinator of the school library media studies at UVM, and she is also a member of Vermont School Library Association.
And it's my understanding that you're here this morning to make some comments from a librarian association point of view on the EQS rules that have been proposed and have been adopted by this board. So, as I know you know, there's public hearings where these comments can be made. So this morning, we're going to certainly listen and learn from your comments, but we will take no action on your suggestions this morning until we take final action on the EQS regulations. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes.
And no.
And no.
Well, that goes back to the survey. I was 60% right.
60%. We're fully aware of the fact that there will be a public comment period in October around the state, and there will be other representatives, parents, school librarians, children, who will be commenting then. Our purpose here today is to focus on the children themselves and what school library programs look like across the state. You may not be spending a lot of time in school libraries, but there's a lot of wonderful things that are happening, and school libraries have changed. It's not your grandmother's library anymore. So what we wanted to do was to share with you a little photo montage across the state of what's happening and how we, as school librarians directing school library programs, are transforming learning. So that's the purpose this morning.
Thank you. Okay, proceed.
We will also address at the very end the school education quality standards.
And also that we met, what's today?
Friday.
Tuesday?
Yes, we met on Friday.
Friday, yes.
Today's Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday.
Okay, please proceed.
So, the Vermont School Library Association is a really very active organization. We have a listserv that helps librarians with issues that come up every day. People are always asking each other for help. And we are very excited this year because we are having a national conference of school librarians in Hartford, Connecticut. And we felt that we wanted to get as many librarians to go to this as we could, and so we're providing a bus that's starting in St. Albans and stopping 5 places down through the state on the way to Hartford. So we're very excited about that. But I would like to also let Judy explain to you why we were here. She's going to give a presentation about how Vermont school libraries are transforming learners in learning for our children in Vermont.
I have been a school librarian. If you had asked me when I was a kid, do you want to be a school librarian when you grow up? I would go, what? I sort of fell into it, but I've been doing it for 40 years. I've been in schools that are K-8, 3-5, K-2, high school. I haven't been in a K-12 school, though. I must admit that. So I've had quite a bit of experience, and since 2007, I've been the coordinator of the School Library Media Studies sequence, which is embedded within the Curriculum and Instruction Master's degree at UVM, so that we can provide a licensure, a way for teachers to become endorsed as library media specialists. And during the time that I've been instructing, since 2001, things have really changed. And right now, I've started a new cycle, a 2-year cycle of courses, and I do the overview course, and I have 18 people enrolled. And of those 18 people, 10 are already teachers, and I have some folks who are in the midst of a life change, and they are interested in this program also. So, What we focus on is really the kids, and that's why you're here too. So we're ready for today's learners, and we're ready for life. Sensory skills for success, and much of that happens in the school library. This is a picture from the Twin Valley Middle High School in Wilmington, Vermont. We're looking at many different ways, so I'm going to show you some of those. Oh, that's better. Thank you. Thank you. As I said, it's not your grandmother's library. School libraries are centers of learning in school and online. Think, create, share, grow. Words that capture how learners succeed in school libraries. And we enthusiastically support equitable access to a collection of resources and media in multiple formats for personalized learning. You go into a library today, it's not just books. There are e-books, there are Kindles, there are computers, there are a wide range of media and equipment. It's a win-win, sharing resources. It's great for the students and teachers, and it's great on the school pocketbook. There's a lot of money invested in school libraries in Vermont. And during the last 10 years, we were talking previously about the access to the internet. In many cases, the broadband internet goes right into the library, and it starts there, and that's been the focal point. Oops, I see a spelling error, sorry about that. It's the Midel School, in case you didn't notice. Guess I'll have to fixing that one. Okay, libraries are transforming from places that keep knowledge to places that seek knowledge. And this is, these are some pictures from the Learning Commons at the Green Mountain Union High School in Chester. I visited there last spring and was really impressed. If you have a chance to visit that school, they have a real new model for delivering services to high school students and teachers. Access to technology for all learners is a must. Learners need instruction and guidance to navigate the information tsunami. Another place to visit, I would recommend, is the U32 High School, which is just up the street here, and also the Montpelier High School Library is a hub of activity for students, all focused on multiple formats of media. There are spaces for, we call them maker spaces. There are spaces for creative expression. Here's an example of the puppet theater that's at the Orchard School Library, but in many schools you'll see that as part of the library there will be a video production area. There will be areas set up with art materials, and I'll be showing you some of those as we go along. Here's an example of a school library website that provides access to resources online 24/7. These are resources for students, they're resources for teachers, and there's an online presence so that if a student's at home, they can use the online resource for the library materials, for databases, accessing recommended reading. Most libraries now are creating websites that are called virtual libraries because they're 24/7. And parents can use it. Oh, and parents too. There are many opportunities for students to think. We believe strongly that reading is a window to the world. Choice by interest and level, freedom to read in preferred formats from print to digital. We know that there are classroom libraries in classrooms that are very important for the instructional piece that goes into teaching reading, foundational reading. But the library provides a broader expanse of literature for all those kids to come in and find something just for them. And here's an example from the Marion Cross School in Norwich. And they were using QR codes to find books and find more information about the books. Think. Inquiry. This is a basic. It's a framework for learning. And here's an example of the librarian and the teacher at Green Mountain High School working on a research project around world cultures. They ended up working with the library resources that were on site. They also made connections with the Dartmouth Library, and the students had an opportunity to go on a field trip after accessing the library catalog at the college and going there and actually using the materials at the college. And it was a great experience for the students, who ended up coming up with some really very fine work. Information fluency, comprehending resources in many formats. I know I keep saying that, but it's a whole new world out there. And evaluating the information is a very, very important part of the teaching foundational reading skills, both in print and online and in other areas. This is Founders Memorial School. This is where I hung out for 24 years. Creating and using authentic learning experiences is an important part of what we know makes deeper learning happen for students. Here's an example of a student who was working on a fashion design project and came to the school library, and the end result was that the librarian went out and bought a sewing machine to have as another form of technology. This was in Waits River in Corinth. Creativity also means self-expression. And here's an example of a project that was happening with a literature course, literature class, and the school librarian, in that they went in and pulled off a whole bunch of books and then made poetry by looking at the spines and figuring out how to align the titles so that they would become a poem. And this is, oops. Never mind. All right, okay. There are multiple pathways to solve problems and innovate. Think critically, problem solve. And there are many resources for the fertile minds of our students in libraries. There are opportunities to share learning. Collaboration is very, very important. The social aspect of the social construct of learning is evident when you go into school libraries. The students and teachers learn together from and with each other. And real-world skills, working as a team. This is a critical thing that employers are asking high school graduates to do. Sharing, connecting to the world, bringing the world to learners through Skype is the title on here. And this is an example of, here's a little girl who's actually speaking with the author and showing her a product that she created as a result of the impact that the literature that the author had written had on her. It's also about digital citizenship and knowing about the global connections around the world and understanding how you are a digital citizen and how you should behave ethically as a digital citizen. Sharing, self-expression through multiple formats of media. I say that over and over again, but it's just a fact of life right now. It's across curriculum and interests. Here's an example of a collaboration that was done with the art teacher and the school librarian. And the art teacher came in and said, I would like my students to do sculptures. How do you think we can make that work? And the school librarian said, well, let's work on characters, and that's Captain Underpants. I don't know if you're familiar with Captain Underpants. He has a bit of a bad reputation with some people, but
You should move on.
But so many kids just love that book. There are opportunities for learners to grow and develop personal skills and mindsets for learning, as well as the confidence to be able to articulate ideas. This is Edmonds Middle School. We have such a wide range of schools, as you well know, from the very urban schools in Burlington to the schools in the Northeast Kingdom and some of the southern parts of the state. One of the students in my class right now is a teacher at the Ripton School, and she has 7 students in her class. We want them to have dispositions for lifelong learning, joy of reading for satisfaction and information. And this is happening in schools throughout Vermont. We want our students to succeed. We want them to be college and career ready. We also, move? Okay. We want them to be ready for life. This is a little unclear. Live long and prosper. We want them to have hopes and dreams for the future. We want happy learners. And in our school libraries, if you go there, you will see happy learners. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, though. We don't call it just the school library. It's a school library program. These are essential for the school library program. Reading and literacy are fundamental to learner success in life. We all agree. The equitable access to resources crosses the digital information divide. It's no longer just the haves and have-nots about having equipment, but it's about information and access to information. Resource sharing is efficient in times of tight budgets, and we do that very well in the school libraries. But successful programs need to be guided by a professional teacher librarian trained as an educational leader, information specialist, instructional partner, and program administrator. We're there for everybody, not just the children, but we're there for our colleagues, for our administrators, for our parents, and for the community. And that's what excites us about this job. We wear many hats, but they're all connected to making learning accessible for our students.
Okay. Thank you, Judy. That was great. That tells just what we do in our schools, and I'm very glad that you could show that to us. We met with Secretary Velaseca originally to talk about the school education quality standards, because the school library program was excluded from the new document. There was no mention of the word library, librarian, school library media specialist. There was no mention at all in the standards. So we talked to Jill Remick, who is the project manager, and Secretary Velaseca on Friday, and we explained that leaving this out would be have implications for our children in Vermont. And one of the big couple issues were that school boards around the state take this as a very important document. They do what it says. And if it is not in there that schools need librarians and libraries and library programs, that these positions will be cut around the state. We documented what happened in Pennsylvania, which was exactly what happened. They weren't in the statutes of the state a few years ago, and then many positions were cut. We talked to the Vermont Consortium of Academic Librarians, and they strongly opposed it because they feel that their students need this access before they get to college. So I'm going to stop there, and if you have any questions, we're just here to let you know what it is that we do, because we've decided that people don't, we're just there in the background.
Well, and we appreciate that, and I think we've learned a lot, and if you have specific language for the.
We do, we've given it to
I would suggest that you
we
submit
have.
that through
We've done that.
through the process, thank you.
We've done that.
And we'll take it up for consideration once the rules come back for final approval here.
Okay, the last thing I would like to say is please come and visit our schools. We want you to come and see what's happening in our schools. We want you to talk to our children. It's a great place to come into, even more than, the classrooms are wonderful too, but sometimes they're busy doing things, but the library is open to everyone. So please come and visit the school libraries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And they did provide very good language aligned with this, with the EQS, so it's actually very, very helpful. I wish most people would provide that type of documentation to support their position.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was actually going to comment and thank Jill for forwarding the side-by-side of
Oh, you saw it,
the-
yes.
that it was really very useful.
Great, thank you. We would now call on Ally Richards to bring us up to date on the Early Learning Challenge Grant process that she's involved in.
That's a big binder, Ally.
You can turn that.
Well, maybe we can switch this
Yeah.
off now.
Jill, you're hearing about where you are in this process.
Thank you all very much. I have never sat in this chair before. It's very exciting.
Good.
I appreciate the time, Chair. And I have a few quick things that I wanted to sort of update you on about early childhood in general. But given the previous presentations, I thought maybe we'd start by how does this relate to the board? Because I know you and I spoke about that a bit, Stephen. And for example, the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge application that we have decided to apply for, and I will explain that to you and the rationale, and we'll walk through that a little bit. It's a systems building grant that I'll get into, and it really has implications for, the prenatal through third grade arena. So it's well into the pre-K through 12 system. We'll have some policy implications. And there's also, if we want to be very concrete, an opportunity for a letter of support for organizations such as the state board for this application. So there's an action item that could potentially be on your agenda if you choose to pursue that. So what I wanted to do mostly is get you all comfortable with the overview, the process, and provide avenues for further comment along the way. So before I dive into the technical aspects of our Race to the Top grant, I just want to make sure to give it in the context of what's happening in early childhood in the state. It's very exciting time right now. I've been actually traveling all over the state. Many people in this room probably are going to be bored since I've already said similar things to them in their organizations. I spoke to the school boards last week and the superintendents, looking forward to speaking with the principals. I've been traveling around, going to the Building Bright Futures regional council meetings, the state council meeting. I've been at the Parent-Child Network. We're doing some family engagement work, the Vermont Family Network. So really trying to, Head Start and their parent policy meeting, really trying to get our arms around this Vermont early childhood system. And it is really exciting. So the sort of big picture is that we have the Governor's Summit on Early Childhood, which you may have heard about, coming up on October 29th. It'll be a working day, so it's a smaller group. We are constrained a bit by numbers, but some representation from the state board would be terrific if someone is interested in perhaps representing the board. We are defining early childhood as prenatal through third grade for the purposes of this grant and this summit for many reasons. One is because that's a national and international trend, so we don't want to miss the boat on grant opportunities or coordination opportunities. Also, it's all about alignment. We definitely understand the brain science, and the governor is one of the first that's out there advocating on this. 0 to 3, 700 connections per minute in your child's brain are forming. It's so important. But
You do not need to hear his personal story that he usually tells at this point, okay?
And I just want to let you know, there's a woman named Claire Oglesby. You can go to our website, find more about that.
Was a school member.
But that being said, something that's very important is all of a sudden, if we continue to say 0 through 3, 0 through 5, and then pre-K through 12, it's like you fall off a cliff, and then you're onto a new thing. So alignment of those systems is really important. It's one of our main themes that you'll see throughout this. So defining it as such is really important for us. And we've gotten some great feedback from the broad community about that. Anyway, so what we hope to come out of this summit, and I think many of you might know, but just to reiterate, we seem to lack a unifying framework for early childhood in this state. We have a lot of terrific work happening. and we have for decades. And yet there's a bit of a lack of organization. We're not necessarily speaking to each other. We're missing opportunities in that way. So one of the key recommendations to come out of the last year or so with the governor and early childhood folks is this idea of a unifying framework. And so Kim Friedman is a consultant who's been working with us on the summit. Basically, we started in March and realized we needed, some time to really suss this out. She did a crosswalk of all the action plans, the current action plans for early childhood in the state, and there were over 35 of them. And those were just current action plans, not the other, background work either. So she did a crosswalk of those plans and found that we have stunning areas of agreement and strength in the system and some areas of weakness or gaps or disagreements. So we've been spending all summer with focus groups around the state trying to dive deeper into those areas of weakness or disagreement. At the end of the day, this framework will come out of all of these hundreds and hundreds of comments and public forums and topic sessions. We're open to comments on the website and the survey. And so we hope to have, come October 29th, this Vermont's early childhood framework. So that's really important. That's going to be there no matter what. The Race to the Top application is a chance for us to get a little bit of funding, a lot of funding, to help shore up some systems. So that's how I see it in big context. No matter what, at the end of the day, we'll have that framework. Do you
Just
have
a question,
Sure.
because of that systemic issue, is there documentation around a lack of equity depending on where you live, the services you get?
That's a great question. And I think you'll see that sort of come out a bit in both of these projects. Personally, as I've been traveling around, you can see inconsistencies certainly
Right.
between different relationships between regional groups, and I guess some access issues as well.
There's
So,
access
I think that you'll see that as sort of bubble up as one of the main issues around the goals and priorities in the framework, and then it also plays into the Race to the Top application. So that's sort of just. Sorry to spend time on that, but I wanted to be sure that you had, an awareness of what we're up to with that summit, because there will likely be policy. We hope that this framework will show us, it's a roadmap, it's not a mandate. It'll show how your work fits in, everyone's work fits into the bigger picture, and then everyone will have their own action agendas, action plans that hopefully speak to the framework, so there's some unification. So you all have, that was a document that you have that sort of explains what we're up to, how do they fit together. Then you have this overview of the Race to the Top application, and that's what I wanted to spend the bulk of the time, and I want to open it up basically to comments as soon as possible. But let me just orient you quickly. We have.
Let me suggest that, let Ally make her presentation. If you have comments or questions, we wait until she is finished.
Great, thank you. So in here, you have our website and our email address to give us comments. And basically, 3 to 8 states will get this grant. It's highly competitive. There are 28 states that are eligible to apply. So we're working really, really hard on it because we think we have a shot, but it's no guarantee, certainly. We are choosing to apply for this where we do not choose to apply for other things, including the Race to the Top. I want to make sure that that's a distinction. This is not the overarching Race to the Top. This is Early Learning Challenge specifically. It's a smaller pot of money. And basically, we applied for this in 2011, but it was during Irene, and we basically did we put together the best possible application given the unbelievably adverse circumstances. And now we have hundreds of reviewers' comments that are incredibly helpful. So it was not a lost cause. It was terrifically helpful, and it's informing this process quite a bit. We've made a lot of strategic changes this time to make sure we put out a stronger application, and yet we just received final guidance, and it's due October 16th. So it's an incredibly, 300 plus pages probably at the end of the day. It's going to be due the 16th. We're on track to get it there. We're cranking. But that's why I want to let you all know and give you these feedback opportunities, because we really have to get this done. But we want to make sure people know what we're up to and can put input. So there's an email address for that. And we're hoping to have, this is sort of a more general, overarching, like to hear your comments, and also because your next meeting is not till after it's due. But October 2nd, we hope to have our first draft. It might be very rough, but then you can actually have specific comments on that draft. So the final thing I'd like to just walk you through is sort of the actual grant itself. Basically, we have to apply for things that are sustainable. It's very much a systems level grant. You can't even apply for direct services if you wanted to, which is unfortunate. We're eligible for up to $37.5 million. It'd be nice to just inject that into, pre-K slots or direct services, but it has to be, we have to apply for things that won't go away after 4 years when the money goes away. So it has to be sustainable. It has to leverage work we're already doing in Vermont. It has to speak to the grant criteria, which you'll see is very prescriptive. And the final thing on that is that the reason why we're applying, and I think it's really important, is that this grant does build off things we are already doing in Vermont. There are no strings attached, so to speak, as you know, what you might see in the Race to the Top General grant. The only strings attached would be reporting requirements. They're very strict reporting requirements, but it's based on the plan that you produce. So there's no additional, fine print there, other than you put forward your high-quality plan, and if they fund it, you just have to stick to it. And report on it. So that's the overview of sort of the logistics. The actual grant itself, so the first area is, if you see on the grant overview, it's under Roman numeral 2A. The entire grant is focused, the absolute priority is children with high needs. So Margaret, that gets a bit at that, it is promoting targeting for children with high needs, but their definition is quite broad, which the definition is printed on here, if you'd like to read that. And the first area is Vermont context. We're basically to explain what have we been up to in Vermont and what are we doing right now. Then we need to put together a budget for the entire plan that adds up to $37.5 million or less. And then we have to go for the subject areas, they basically start in B, high quality accountable programs. This is about our STARS, our STARS system, which many of you might be familiar with. It's and promoting access to early learning and development programs. And then, so that's, you must write to that entire category. We have a good story to tell on STARS. We have all of our pre-K programs, for example, must participate in STARS. But we could do more to promote access, to move programs up the ladder to more STARS for monitoring and evaluation and training. The next area is promoting early learning and development outcomes. This is standards and assessment for shorthand, aligning early learning standards, and then assessments to go with it, formative assessments likely, developmental screening, for example. And then 3 is identifying and addressing health, behavioral, and developmental needs. This is really where home visiting comes in. Many of you might know about our robust home visiting program that's getting stronger by the day. This is where we would speak to that. Really important for the rural aspects of Vermont to have this. Then we have the great early childhood education workforce, which, supporting early childhood educators, so sort of a collaboration with higher ed and professional development. And then finally, measuring outcomes and progress, which is kindergarten readiness and data, so the data system. So I like to use that as an example of the perfect strategy. A one-time investment to move our data system to where it needs to be, so we have an aligned longitudinal data system from early learning through the K-12 system. On the back page is additional priority, since we think it's going to be very highly competitive, since everyone, almost every state has already applied before too, so everyone has sort of a leg up this time. There are some competitive priorities, and we will be applying for all of those to get the extra points, and we feel like we have a good chance at getting those as well, because one is promoting inclusion in our STARS program, which we do. The other one is understanding kindergarten readiness. And then this is sort of our big first victory, addressing the needs of children in rural areas. It's a new competitive priority. We pushed really hard for it. The congressional delegation did as well in our public comments before we got the final application, and they did add that. So that's 5 extra points that we could potentially get. And they sort of call it the Vermont priority. So that's a good sign. But we have a lot of work to do, and so now I'd like sort of to open it up and get questions and also feedback on each of these aspects. I know some might be more pertinent than others, but I just want to make sure we keep in mind sort of the expectations of what this really could mean for Vermont, and also what we can actually apply for.
Bill?
Couple of things. The first is a practical one, is how many other states do you think are in the running? In other words, what's their chances?
So 28 are eligible to apply. Some won't, because their governors don't want anything to do with the federal government, which is, that's good for us. And some won't because it's too hard, and it's a very small window. I think they only gave us 6 weeks to do it. Yeah. Practically speaking, my guess would be about 20 states. Only 3 to 8 will get funding given the different rankings. I did talk to BUILD, which is a national organization that sort of, runs the algorithms on this, and they were thinking probably around 6 or 7 will end up getting it. And if you just take the scores from last time, it is called the race to the top for a reason. You get points based on how much progress you've made in your state, which is sort of a reverse incentive. But you basically, the last round, we would have been 12th. If you cut it off on who got funded, we would have been 12th. And if 3 to 8 get it, then we have some spots move up. However, there were holes in our application. We have a much more coordinated team this time around. The governor's office is highly involved. I'm sort of acting as the project manager. There was no project manager last time. And we've hired a professional grant writer. And that's incredibly important. And the philanthropic community is supporting us in that. And a huge thank you to them. And we basically got the only grant writer that we could afford. And he's absolutely terrific. He has federal grants experience, the only one with the criteria we were looking for that we could afford, because it's absolutely it's absolutely wild out there. We did a lot of work on digging and talking to other states. $500,000 for some consultants, and that's why rural states are at a disadvantage in a lot of these big opportunities. We didn't want to, nor could we put that sort of funding out.
Billy, your second question?
Yes, so in other words, this isn't a slam dunk, it's pretty good competition.
Yes.
The substantive question is, and you made reference to this, is that this doesn't deal with program provision of services to kids, and this is the thing that was the question that I had was, what is this going to do to expand programs to improve the quality of programs that we've got? And I take it this becomes a planning process, but what is coming out of the planning process on where we need to focus to really move the early ed forward?
That's a great question, and I would direct that more towards the summit process and the framework process. That's what we're looking at there. How do we expand quality and access? And this is sort of, we were looking at it as sort of an hourglass. That's the broad part, the top of the hourglass. This is the narrow part to sort of shore up and create some systems that will be the foundation to help us with our big goals of promoting access and quality. So, if we now have a stronger STARS and incentive programs, if we have a data system that's aligned, these are these sort of systems level foundational injection of funds that will then help us with the bigger picture.
Will we know more from your draft on October the 2nd as to what the focus areas that are needed for the state would be?
I would say you'll know, yes, you will, because we're coordinating with the summit and framework work. The A2 asks us for our overarching reform agenda for the state. And so we don't have to speak to all that in the application, because as then you see, it gets very prescriptive beyond that. But that is going to be the same as our statewide framework that we're putting together, that document that we're putting together for the October 29th, that has taken, 7 months and lots of consensus and public comment to create. So there will be alignment, but I think that's going to give you more answers.
Margaret?
Okay.
I'm wondering how, I understand how it doesn't do any direct services, but I'm wondering how the process can help you highlight inequity where it exists and shine the light on inequity, because sometimes if that light is shined on it, where it is and what it is, it will encourage local places to address it. Just as the TEL survey, is showing a range around the state, and people can connect with each other when they see results in other places.
Yep.
This might help bring information into local places to help them address issues.
Sure.
Because I do think depending on where you live, the typical 3-year-old, not the 3-year-old with special needs necessarily, but the typical 3-year-old, there's real disparity in terms of opportunity. And if this can gather data that will shine a light on that, that might help.
Just to give you sort of a sneak preview, 2 of the strategies that we are considering. Nothing is finalized yet. Tomorrow we have a full day drafting meeting. Friday we have another one, so things will really start shaping up. But 2 of the strategies being considered are asset mapping, which I think does exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
The other thing is sort of the idea of targeting neighborhoods or regions specifically that need that extra boost. So I would say the better answer for you is, as we look at this, we look at it through a lens of making sure that the community is still the focus, making sure we then as a state provide guidance and organization and support for the community, and especially targeting where it's needed most. And not reinventing the wheel is another huge theme for us throughout this, because we want to make sure we're not just wiping out systems, even if they don't work well, supporting them instead of trying to reinvent the wheel.
And Stephen, I just want to add, and this has nothing to do with the race to the top, but the governor's office has been and the governor has been very interested in making sure that all communities initiate pre-K programs, and we came up with about $400,000 at the agency level, and with some matching monies from funders, separate from Race to the Top, to target those communities that may not have either taken advantage or unable to start these relationships, the public-private partnerships. So that is something that, regardless of this, is moving forward, and we've targeted several communities that we hope will go through the needs assessment process to look at starting programs. This will add to, not financially, but at least conceptually, to make sure and bring that awareness that all communities need to be engaged in having, with their local schools, to have 3- and 4-year-old programs, high quality 3- and 4-year-old programs.
And to that end, Armando, that, H-270 is the universal pre-K bill, which is still alive and,
yes.
Passed the House, and passed, and is working its way through the Senate. So we definitely anticipate that being on the table this biennium. And I think, it relates to your priorities as well.
And one of the priorities that we just later on my list of priorities, Ally, thank you, just gave one of the priorities.
Kristen?
You talked about a statewide data system.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about just a resource center, because you've probably seen there's so many different things going around the state, and I think that's a common thing I keep hearing today. We've kind of been talking about this, that there's so many different things going around the state, but there's not a lot of methods to share.
Yep.
That goes on in secondary and primary schools, but I think especially pre-K, and if you have money to create the system, if we're talking about statewide data, and then also resources so we can find out what's going on in these different areas too, that'd be really helpful. I think we could really build on that throughout the years.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Let me ask the board, as Ally said at the very beginning, that she is reaching out and soliciting support. We're not going to be reconvening the board until after this application is drafted. Is the board of a mind that they would like to pass a motion of creating a letter of support for the Early Learning Challenge Grant?
So moved.
Moved by Bill Mathis. Is there a second by Margaret? Is there any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. You can go back to work now.
Come on, you made my life easy. Well, just so you know, although you do not have a meeting, I'm available, the drafting team is available. We're definitely looking for input, because if we get it, implementation can be a bear if we don't, make sure we're doing it right from the beginning, so.
Speaking of drafting,
We're not
draft the
charging.
letter that we just,
Got it. It's already done.
passed. And I will sign it.
Wow.
Ally, thank you.
But there are some specific, there's a template, but there's also specific places for the
Yeah.
board, so it doesn't look like it
So I'll
could be
work
cut
with
it.
you, Stephen, on that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. Thanks
Thank
for all the
you.
hard work. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ally, you should touch base with Carol too. I think that she can probably, maybe easier than.
Okay, moving on to item E, information on student data collection by Deputy Commissioner John Fisher. Yeah.
Paperless society.
Ally, one kind of a question on the side, has nothing to do with early ed. I don't remember which piece of legislation, but there was something recently passed last year where the governor's educational priorities was supposed to arrive here.
September 1st?
I was not going to mention the date, but
I think that was passed 2 years ago, actually. So, we are actually working on that.
Okay.
We've been in touch with you briefly on that, Stephen. Armando and I are in touch. I'm in touch with the school board's principals and superintendents, and EA have been on that as well, so.
And Ally, the three priorities that you and I talked about were, that's what I was gonna talk about today. One of them was the early ed. I don't wanna give away it.
You're right, there are no surprises. Again, we've already spoken early ed, technology, similar things. It seems to be aligning quite well with the state board priorities again. We're definitely in communication, but please, we do apologize for the delay.
No need to apologize, but I would even question the date that was in the legislation, but it is there, so we would urge you to, when that's finalized, to get that to us. John?
I am here to briefly review some data questions as they relate to our state longitudinal data system, fondly referred to as SLDS. We have another acronym to add to our glossary of acronyms. This is a document that I have narrowed down from a larger document from our SLDS team in the information technology area under Dr. Talbot. And Bill Talbot and I co-chair the Bill and I co-chair what's referred to as the data governance team, which is made up of a cross-section of educators across the state to guide us on what data to look at, how to look at it, how to secure it, how it will be used, and the general structure of the software, the hardware, and the data governance processes. If we collect something, who governs it, who owns it, how do we secure it, how are we using it, if we stop using it, how do we get rid of it, those types of things. So I think there were some early questions on some of that, and some of this is repeat, and if we want to get in deeper to this, we can schedule some further time with our IT Director, Brian Townsend, and our project manager that has been hired on this for this particular project under the federal grant, Lisa Garvin. So this is a quick update on some of this. The thing that strikes me, first of all, which may answer some quick questions, is the benefits of this right off the bat. I see as benefiting the field. Because we are right now at the agency one of the few states that has not received a federal longitudinal data system grant yet. So we are 1 year into this. When it is completed in 3.5 years roughly, it will automate a lot of the manual data reporting that right now afflicts not only the agency but more importantly out in the field. There's a lot of manual reporting, there's a lot of disconnected systems. And this takes up, in one estimate at the bottom of the first page, about over 12,000 hours a year of staff time out in the schools. Once automated, these reporting mechanisms, including for one collection, 199 different files that have to be compiled that right now, even within the agency, are collecting data from a number of disconnected systems, which might be a desktop at somebody's desk area, to a system, software on a server that they have to be incorporated into. In some cases, it is literally manual reporting that is received from the field. So that will be all automated in a data mining way with the local student information systems at the local schools. The technician side of that, the technology side of that, is all about compliance systems that work together. The federal grant covers that to assure that if they aren't SIF compliant, that we can make them that way. We can draw that down in an automated fashion. So right off the bat, the automation of this data reporting is a significant benefit to the field. I think some of our other issues and questions about, anytime you talk about the national concerns about big data. You know, what are you collecting, why are you collecting it, and who's securing what you collect? And I think it largely focuses on the concern about student-level data, how we secure that. So these projects, as you might imagine, are guarded by FERPA and HIPAA. So FERPA is another acronym out there, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And these are very, very strict as to how we collect data, how we secure the data, and these systems that we are in the process of designing and setting up with vendors must meet those compliant issues before we even consider them for purchasing or for consulting. So that's on the federal level, the deep oversight and concerns for privacy of data. I know that we have had specific questions from school boards and some school districts, and we've gone out and visited a number of them. There are concerns out there, and there is also some misinformation. For instance, as we move forward with the Smarter Balance assessment and in these data projects, we've been asked about why would we be collecting biometric data, and sometimes that's misconstrued to be biomedical data on students, and we are not. Some of this nationally has gone through a series of extrapolated understandings. But FERPA, for instance, if we go back a couple of years, FERPA did not govern and did not encompass the collection and use of biometric data on students. And this is referring to fingerprints or facial recognition software.
Scanning.
Yeah, things like that. So schools
Fingerprints.
and organizations that do collect that data were not governed on how they needed to secure that. Biometric data was not under FERPA at one point. They did, a year or two ago, put the biometric data under FERPA, so now it's guarded and protected. In some areas, that was misconstrued to be that schools were now collecting this and they could sell it. It was exactly the opposite. Prior to that, schools or organizations did collect that, and they were able to, whether they did it or not is a whole other issue, they were able to, at will, just deal with it how they chose. FERPA now governs that, says if you collect it, you have to keep it at the same level of privacy and security as all the other student and family data on there. We do not collect biometric data. We do not scan fingerprints of students. We don't have radio frequency chips in ID cards that, but that I'm aware of. There are some schools in the country that do that so that they can secure doors and, similar to the cards that we use have a radio frequency chip in them. We don't collect any of that data. If we did, we would be governed by FERPA and HIPAA on the use of that. Part of the security of these systems is built into this project. So you see in the middle of the second page how we are going to manage that. We will, with consultants, be developing security roles and responsibilities, security policies, information access policies, how, once we have this data, how people will access it and what they need to do, and how people will not be able to access that.
John, we have very strict guidelines sharing data between agency data, for example, with, we have a couple of memos of understanding with DCF and AHS around some data. We have another one with the state colleges around some data. But any request for data has to go through a group of folks who then review that data and determine whether this is appropriate to share or not. So we take this very seriously in-house. So just as in addition to what John is describing.
It's a very rigorous process that outside or inside we have to go through in order to share or even discuss the possibility of sharing. Privacy issues, security issues aside, what we collect is generally governed by federal requirement. That's the vast majority of what we collect. Information like the student enrollment course transcript, the SECT collection, was required by receipt of ARA funds and the jobs funds back a few years ago. And that was a requirement of accepting those funds. Other information that we may gather or look at in the future generally falls under the category of looking to broaden the set of indicators for accountability measures and progress monitoring of schools and districts. And I would characterize that as more aggregating of student data as opposed to looking at particular student data, but we do need to collect student-level data in order to aggregate that out. So what I'm referring to here is we hear a lot of times that there is a narrowing of accountability and indicators of effectiveness. And that certainly comes from NCLB or other measures. We want to look beyond that. In the past few years, we have looked beyond proficiency, for instance. When you look at proficiency on NECAP, it is not a detailed indicator of how students are really doing and how schools are really doing. Example, this year with the Adequate Yearly Progress Report, we not only had to meet the federal guidelines about AYP announcements, but we took the opportunity to dig deeper into that data to say up to 2/3 of the schools are showing closure of achievement gaps by looking at index scores, scale scores, deeper into some of the NECAP measures. One of the key other examples that I'll put out there to illustrate how we're looking at other data, 3 years ago I was talking with school leaders, and their proficiency measures on NECAP indicated that there was a problem with literacy in the school. And we narrowed it down into a particular grade level. And the immediate reaction was, we need to work with that teacher. When we backed up and did a deeper dive into the data, and this gets under the category of root cause analysis, we looked deeper at the data and we found the teacher was doing fine, the students that were there were doing fine. It was the students that had a high absentee rate that were not doing fine, and it immediately shifted in the root cause analysis to an issue of tardiness, absenteeism, and truancy, not an issue of reading and literacy and teacher quality. So it's those types of indicators of deeper effectiveness that we're looking to pursue. So that characterizes in general where we are at, and look to take any questions.
Any questions or comments? Looks like you did a great job. Thank you, John.
I can't believe Bill doesn't have a question.
Well, I've got lots of questions.
I didn't think I'd get out of here that easy.
Let's move on. We're a little behind here.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, John. The next item is the consent agenda, and I believe this month the only thing that's in the consent agenda is the minutes for the August meeting.
So moved.
And moved by Sean Marie, is seconded by
Kristen.
Krista. I didn't know whose hand went up over there. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The minutes from the last meeting have been accepted. Item G. I would ask Vaughn and the folks from Wyndham Central to come up to the table. A quick explanation here on this item, and it's a little unusual. As you recall, at our August meeting, we gave approval to the Wyndham Central to move ahead with their RED study group. Since, in a 6-2 vote, I believe. In a subsequent to that, the agency and the Attorney General's office has reviewed the proposal, and the Attorney General office has advised that the second vote provision probably is unconstitutional. So I think procedurally, what we need to do today, if this is the way you want to go, is I need a motion from someone who voted for the motion back in August to reconsider, and assuming that passes, then we'll move on and look at the new proposal, which has been worked out.
Yeah. Stephen, I don't think that Robert's Rules requires that somebody who voted for it have to bring it up. This was an official vote that was taken, even though the agency did recommend that would not go this way. The vote was taken. It was a duly warned meeting, legal vote. It occurred, the board meeting occurred. Now, I think at this point, anyone can bring up the motion to reconsider.
But you're asking to reconsider it.
Not reconsider, revote. No, it's not a reconsider. You voted on it. You voted on it. It's not a reconsideration. It's to review that vote and vote again on one that follows the Constitution and the laws of our state and country.
I didn't realize that you'd had as much parliamentary experience as perhaps the chairman of the board had.
Well, we looked at, we had a meeting yesterday and we looked at this.
I'll do
This
it.
meeting was,
And I was one of the original.
Well,
you can, I mean, it doesn't matter how you do it. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be somebody who voted in affirmative
all right, but
to
we
bring it
need,
up.
but we need to negate what we did in August and look at a new proposal.
Yes.
So,
I voted for it,
and
and I will.
Mark raised his hand first, so it's Mark's motion.
I'll second it.
Margaret's second is to reconsider the action that we took on the Wyndham Central back in August. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of reconsideration say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. All right, it's on the table, and we have a new proposal from Wyndham Central. Vaughn, do you want to?
I'll just simply.
Why don't we do introductions
Yes.
first? Just, not that we don't know each other.
Stephen John, the superintendent of schools for Wyndham Central Supervisory Union, including the 5 towns and Leland and Gray, that these articles would affect.
Emily Long, I'm chair of the Leland and Gray High School Board, Wyndham Central Supervisory Union Board, and chair of the Red Study Committee.
Vaughan Ultimates Agency of Education. I'll turn it over to the representatives of the supervisory union in very quickly. The only, and they did a commendable job of getting together and rewriting language that we've passed on. The language meets, as we understand them, the Attorney General's concerns. The Attorney General hasn't and doesn't typically review this particular language. The only provision I want to call to your attention before turning it over is, given the shortness of time, the study committee needed time to decide the most opportune moment for a vote. It simply wasn't possible to have it when it had originally been warned. And they didn't want to rush that decision. They wanted to think about it. And that sounds very, very reasonable to us. So we have the amended language. There are still other places, there are other places in the report that you passed at the last meeting where, when they've determined a date, will need to be updated. So there are places where dates will change and be made consistent, and at that time, they've agreed, and it seems appropriate to us that they will bring a complete copy of the report to you. I imagine it'll be done during the other business section, and very, very routine. But other than that, it's.
The board should understand that the Red Committee, based on our decision in August, had warned the meeting for the vote in these 5 towns. And in fact, we're in the process of having informational meetings when this issue came up. So it really is commendable that they've turned it around so quickly and made it happen. But what Vaughn is saying to you is that they're proposing new language in section 12 of it, but without the date. However, they will come back to us subsequently when that date is settled. They don't need to drive all the way to Montpelier or wherever we are. You can send us a letter, and we'll take the date up at that point.
Could be consent agenda even.
And if I can make one last point that the chair will be too modest to make, but he took the initiative to discuss the matter with the representatives of the committee personally, and my sense is it probably also had a very positive effect. And with that, I turn it over to you.
And that's a good segue into my comment, and I did want to say thank you for the support, Stephen, and others, you, Vaughn, as well. There's been a lot of support from the AOE and from Stephen and your board to help us move through this very challenging moment for us. As Stephen mentioned, we had already begun our information meetings. We had held one.
I called Stephen the day he was going to Wardsboro.
And we were heading out the door for another one when I found out about this, and it was a bit of a setback. We did have to make an announcement at an informational meeting in Jamaica, Vermont. about this, and I was very pleased with the committee's response, the study committee's response, as well as the community's. There's always bumps in the road, and this is the way we looked at this one. And so we have, with Stephen's support and certainly much work from Stephen John sitting to my right, we have come up with new language. I'm assuming you have that in front of you.
Yes.
And it sounds like it's been pretty thoroughly vetted. Our committee is in support. It didn't take them very long at all to recommend that Stephen and I come in front of you today again to see if we can get your support to move forward and maybe take the path that Vaughn is suggesting and the AOE has supported.
Thank you. Stephen, you have anything you'd like to add?
Slide the mic over towards Stephen. I'm sorry. No, it's been a great adventure, and it continues to be an adventure. It's a troubled path. It's well worth taking. I encourage other people in the state to consider it. Any adventure in inclusive democracy always has these issues, and the Red Committee looks forward to setting a date that they think will be give the most opportunity to inform the public. That, obviously, we're continuing with the present information series of meetings. Tonight is Wyndham. Next Tuesday is Newbrook for Brookline and Newfane. So the committee is, the study committee is committed to continuing the information process. We don't see that this particular change of the article is that difficult to overcome. I do think that the challenge will be for our communities to wrap their heads around a broader sense of responsibility than their own individual towns, and that's common of all of these proposals. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary.
I want to thank both Stephen and Emily, and particularly Emily for her role, having known you for a few years, that you've taken around red formations, and you've been one of those voices that I think doesn't always come, that I always hear from school board members, that looking at this beyond just your town and a much broader perspective, as well as statewide perspective. So I thank you, and I encourage you to keep that voice strong and be a resource for others around the state.
Questions or comments from the board? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the proposal as written.
Second.
And there's a second from Lachlan. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The vote's unanimous, 8-0, and I can go home tonight.
Should invite them to lunch.
May I ask,
Now, you've already won the motion, so be careful,
I just want to inform the board, the study committee's intention is to come to some conclusion quickly regarding the vote date and therefore be able to amend these articles appropriately or edit them appropriately to support that timeline, change of timeline. And we hope that we can have that presented to you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks
Yes.
for all that work.
Oh, because that's right, we're absent one board member today, pardon me. And that reminds me, if those of you that haven't signed in yet, would you please sign in back there on the left?
Thank you. And Stephen, there's no rush. It's up to you. It's on your timeline.
I understand,
You
but
know that, right?
I just want to make sure you know that's our intention.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break, and are there announcements from board members? Krista?
Okay, so the other day I went to the New England Secondary School Consortium teleconference meeting. So it was held at the agency. And just for new members, New England Secondary School Consortium, also known as the Consortium, because all the acronyms gets confusing. It's not, it's very similar to some other ones. But anyways, we talked about just their mission, their idea of accountability, talking about graduation rates, college enrollment, talking about career and college readiness. And this is an organization with Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, Connecticut. So all the schools coming together and talking about those issues. And it was really interesting listening to the other states and the issues that they're dealing with, and then moving towards proficiency-based education. The one thing, and is Armando over there? It was the rub for them, was that UVM is the only state school that has not accepted proficiency-based graduation transcripts that they said they wouldn't accept. So I know that they are going to talk to you, because UVM's the only one. The University of Connecticut has accepted, URI has, but UVM still hasn't. So that was kind of the rub with all the New England states, that Vermont was the last one. And even though we've passed proficiency-based for talking about EQSs, and then UVM is not accepting that. So something I thought we should be aware of and be working towards. Other things that came up from other states and issues that I thought might be important for us to talk about, New Hampshire really brought this up, is that if you're talking about proficiency-based education at the state board level, what's the outreach to the other school boards around the state? Which I thought was interesting, if we have made any, just reaching out to school boards around the state and just saying, hey, we're looking at EQS, this is why we want proficiency-based, this is what we want it to look like, and have more communication. And we haven't even talked about that as a board. And so taking it from the state board down to the other boards and what our communication is going to be. The one other thing Rhode Island ran into was having internships. There was actually a law saying you couldn't be, if you're under 16, you couldn't participate in an internship. And we didn't know in Vermont, we at our roundtable, if there was a law that pertains to internships and that would limit students.
Certain things they can do at certain ages. There are some things that if you're a 15-year-old, you can't do, and I think Mark, same thing with probably in the work world.
Yeah,
So
like
yes,
in the
there are
restaurant,
some.
there's certain pieces of equipment, right.
So that was something that we even talked about in the Vermont that maybe we should look into, and how does that limit students? Is there any legislation needed if we're going to encourage internships, especially at earlier ages? And let's see. Just Maine really echoed, I think, what a lot of people were thinking, that unique interpretations of proficiency-based education really creates different expectations, different learning experiences, and how to, if we have proficiency-based education, how do we make sure there's more equity at the same time? And that was just something that they had echoed. So it was a great conversation. They're getting together again in October, and I'll just keep you aware of what they're talking about.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other, Mark?
Yes, I've been participating in a Hunger Council of Addison County, which has been put together and led by the Hunger Free Vermont Council. And I just found out that they've actually been around for about 20 years, which was surprising to me, because I really haven't heard of them that much, and I'm not sure.
Changed names, Mark, about a year ago.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's one of the reasons you may not have heard.
Yeah. And anyways, I've been real impressed with their organization and their diligence and trying to, make hunger, non-existent. But in particular, yesterday at our council meeting was all around school meals, farm to cafeteria, and the impact that, hungry kids have on the lack of their ability to learn and so forth. And I think at some point it would be nice for us to be able to have Hunger Free Vermont and come and speak to us and how hunger impacts learning for all our students, and how this board might be able to impact either legislation through policy or recommendations that will help all schools. Because one of the things that I can say for sure that's happening in our county is just through these Hunger Council meetings, we're bringing everybody to the table that has a concern with this, and that hasn't happened before in Addison County. So,
Just to follow, Steve,
Yes.
just to follow up, when I first raised this idea with the governor about looking at the reduced lunch kids also getting the free lunch, this was an area that he was very enthusiastic about, with the idea is, what's the long-term plan? And I think that's what you're talking about. So step one was, I'm sure this is probably like step 10, but step one that we're working on is to move the reduced lunch children to free lunch. What's the goal 10 years from now? What the goal that I've had ever since I can remember was, can we get all of our children to have free lunches, breakfast and lunch in schools, which brings in more federal reimbursements for every meal served. The more food you buy, the lower the cost, and then that connection with our local farmers, so it provides that farm to school connection and provides a regular customer base, if you will, for the farmers. And it also then encourages healthier eating for many of our children. So that's, I think, when we look at the long-term goal, and I think that's where the board might want to look at, is what would the board's recommendations be as a policy for Governor Shumlin or whoever the next and future governors are, that the goal should be. In a small state like Vermont, we can do that. And Hunger Free Vermont, as well as Lori Colgan, the head of our child nutrition program, can tell us how much it would cost. And, when you figure we're spending $1.5 billion, $1.4 billion on public education, doesn't take that much money to make that a reality.
Right. And one of the things that, I really piqued my eyebrows up at yesterday was one of the things that got mentioned. There was through a Quebec study, that the achievement gap was eliminated through offering meals to all students in the school.
That's right.
And then they also cited that Milton has shown quite a significant progress through their offerings of meals at Milton as well.
Yeah. Great food service director, and they've just taken one of our top employees.
Yeah. So.
Krista?
Just to echo that, in the day and age that we're giving out computers, I mean, this is a school-issued computer, every student gets one, but we don't issue lunch. So it's just kind of interesting when you put those two next to each other, that how much would it cost? That would be an interesting maybe presentation for, compared to the school lunch, to the technology that students are getting. And with that little piece, what change would that make in our schools? I think that'd be a really interesting conversation.
The only difference might be you have to return that computer when you graduate, don't you?
You do. In some schools, they allow them to keep them.
In a lot of school
Yeah.
programs, they do compost. So it depends how
So they
much
do
you're
return
looking to it.
Moving right along, are there other, Margaret?
I was at a meeting of Rural Trust Global Fellows in North Carolina this weekend, and 5 of the fellows were teachers from Vermont. 2 teachers from Moortown, including the librarian whose picture of the Skyping was on their part of their PowerPoint. 2 teachers from Moortown went on a journey in France, Italy, and Germany to follow a fairy tale trail and look at bringing fairy tales back into their classrooms more consistently. 2 teachers from Cabot School, 3rd and 4th grade teachers, went to Peru to look at the mountain cultures, rural mountain culture in Peru, and compare it to Cabot, Vermont. And they did a fair amount of volunteering at a school and orphanage there, and learned a huge amount. And one teacher from Rivendell went to Palestine and Israel. He's a high school social studies teacher, so he was able to learn a huge amount to help explain with students that issue of security, oppression, the contrasts he observed during his trip. So this is something that all Vermont teachers who work in a rural school, so they have to have their rural locale code to do their application, can apply for. And this is the 4th year of the program, and every year Vermont teachers have been awarded grants. So I'm hoping it's something that more Vermont teachers will consider applying for.
Bill?
Couple of things. I did a VPR program and also a cable television program this past month, and did a couple of blogs and op-eds that were covered nationally as well as in the state. One point I would bring out that I thought was very interesting in the 45th Gallup poll, which was just released, is most people had not heard of the educational reform agenda, or the federal one or the national one that's going on. But of the people who had heard of it, they don't approve of it in terms of the top-down, standards-based, test-based kinds of accountability system. And all of a sudden, that gets important when we think about our priorities, which we're going to have a discussion on here before the day's out, in terms of accountability and assessment.
Any other announcements? If not, we'll move on to my brief report. If you recall, at the August meeting, we agreed on creating 3 state board committees, and I believe at that time I was authorized to make appointments to the committees. So I would like to announce those now. The Legislative Committee, Bill Mathis will chair, Sean Marie, Lachlan, and myself will serve on that. The Supervisory Study Committee, Steve Dale will chair, Stacy, Mark, Krista, and Morgan will serve as members. And the Strategic Planning Committee, Bonnie will serve as the chair. Margaret, Stacy, and Bill will also serve on the Strategic Planning Committee.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to the, and as these committees do their work, there may be, I leave a lot of discretion with the chairs of the committees, but there may be a need or a possibility of including other board members. But I thought to get us going, this would be a reasonable way to get started. And I tried the best I could to respond to the wishes that each of you had in serving. Mr. Secretary, your report.
Yes, I'll be brief. And Bill, I'm sorry, what was was it a Pew survey that was done? I'm sorry, what did you say was the?
Gallup poll.
And the question, I guess I'm interested in asking how the question was asked, because you're talking about top-down, I guess you're talking about the standards movement? Or was it?
In general, you can get the.
Yeah, I want to look, I want to find out.
Phi Delta Kappa Gallup poll is 45th poll.
Okay. That's just, I wanted to find out and how they asked the question, because I guess when I think of top-down, I think of federal government, and these, what we're working on right now are states really led standards, so I guess I want to find out how they asked that question.
It's on the web.
Yeah, and I will look, thank you. I wasn't sure if you said Pew. I couldn't remember, my mind was Gallup or Pew, but Gallup is the one that I'll look at. Just briefly, speaking of standards, I have a Common Core op-ed piece that I'll be sending out to the papers just to explain a little bit more about that so that people understand as we move to implementing the new standards this coming year, that folks understand about how this is an evolution from our current standards to new ones, and really was states-led. By the way, and for those who don't remember, it was the National Governors Association and CCSSO, which is the chiefs organizations, that were the two groups that were really looking at how do we come up with states agreeing on common standards. And Governor Jim Douglas was the president of the National Governors Association, who worked very closely with President Obama and his administration on this. So I'm trying to provide some of that background information. Of course, everybody has their own opinion about things, but I don't remember when we started the NECAP standards 12 years ago, whatever it was, all the controversy around standards, when standards are just something that we all need to have and are not curricula. Curricula is written at the local level. And I do believe these standards are an improvement over our current ones, which have served us very well. This past week, I was at a meeting with the, Vermont is on the governing board for the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortia. Met with all of the other commissioners or deputy commissioners who are voting on finalizing some of the information that we need before the test goes live. We all know that coming up in the next month to 8 weeks, Vermont, along with the other 30-some-odd states that are participating, will be having a pilot. And those schools and we have about 10,000 students participating in this pilot, and out of those schools, they're not having to take the NECAP. They're only taking SBAC in the fall. They will not then take NECAP in the spring. And interesting enough, when I put this memo out to all the schools, I think I put it on a Thursday. By Sunday afternoon, I had reached the 10,000 students that needed to be to volunteer. Schools volunteered for this. And I think within the next 3 or 4 days, we had another 10,000 or so students eligible that I had to say no to. And several schools wanted to do both, the NECAP and the SBAC assessment. And we said no, that it was only one. But again, there's an excitement, particularly around how the SBAC assessment has been developed and the work that people are seeing, that it is an adaptive test. What I saw this weekend was it'll come in, right now it's gonna come in like 8 different languages the first year. The second year is gonna increase to double that. So English language learners will be able to take this assessment. It'll be in Braille. It can be read to kids. The print could be large. There's a lot of different options for this that make it much more progressive than any other assessment that's out there right now. And it will continue to become, again, it's adaptive. And it will be able to measure, and we have this down, we'll be able to measure proficiency, where children are in a particular grade span, and even right now, we're working on outside of those grade bands, which is really where, as we work towards proficiency-based, both here, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut and Maine, we need that. If we really are looking at proficiency, we need to be able to see where kids are, regardless of what their chronological age is. And SBAC has been very supportive. It's the federal government that is providing some obstacles to that. And the big question, and I think John alluded to it earlier, was the security. The data belongs to the states, does not belong to either SBAC or the PARC consortia. They will not have any identifiable information. It'll all be based on student numbers that will own all the information, and it will follow all of the FERPA and all of the privacy requirements, and maybe more than we have right now. So it really is, we are very concerned about that. As John mentioned before, there are folks out there who are saying that some things that are maybe not necessarily accurate about student identifiable information going to these consortia. The question is no. The answer is no. It will stay with us. I also met on last week with George Coleman, who's the president of SAT, and several other commissioners and folks from higher ed around how does SAT, and eventually, and I see Travis is here from ACT, how will ACT and these fit in the new world? Will colleges start looking at SBAC as a part of the entrance requirement, which they are right now having those discussions? Will SAT or ACT start looking at having assessments that may be aligned with the Common Core that could be provided at the 11th, 9th, 10th grade levels or earlier? There's a lot of discussion out there, but not a whole lot of facts, because right now the only 2 assessment consortia that have been approved are SBAC and PARC. But it'll be interesting to see how ACT and SAT will fit into this down the road. And I know Margaret has an interest in that area that we can discuss.
My interest is in reducing the amount of testing. And it seems like if students are able to do one test at the high school level that meets college entrance requirements and meets why would you do, No Child Left Behind requirements, that is better than having high school students do 2, which they currently do, and which currently families are paying for the second test, the one they really need for college application, rather than doing 1 test. I don't particularly care which test, but I'm interested in reducing the amount of standardized testing. I also wondered, Armando, what percentage of Vermont schools are ready for the SBAC in terms of technology?
Okay. Can I go back to the first question? I think they'll be more than happy to talk about that. I think that what you're looking at is somewhat limiting. I'm looking at maybe more than just one or the other. But that's a discussion that if the board wants on the agenda, we could have this. I know Margaret wants this on the agenda. But just so folks know, we are committed to the SBAC. We're part of the SBAC governing board. We have been a major player in that. And I don't see SAT or ACT right now having anything that even resembles the type of adaptive test that SBAC is able to provide, because I've asked them, and they're not there.
But the SBAC test is also untested.
It's not been
going
field
through a
tested
pilot.
yet. SAT has.
It's being field tested right now, but understand that the SAT and ACT, and again, talk to the folks, and we can have, and I'm not asking you to do anything today, Travis, because I know I've asked you about this, and
I'm here, I'm happy to provide input as needed.
I know, but I know that you and I've talked about this, and you right now don't have that information. But that's where it's gonna be tested this year. But it's a much better assessment than we currently have in the kneecap, which is just a standard, it's a solid test, but it is not adaptive, and it is not able to assess our Common Core. SAT and ACT will have to show that they are aligned with the Common Core and are not just a stagnant sort of test that is the way we've always known tests. So we can talk about that. I have no problem, no qualms
Let me,
in doing that.
and this is getting a little bit ahead, but later today, we're going to be looking at board priorities, which have been drafted. Priority number 2 talks about state and local assessment systems. Presuming that we approve these priorities today, my suggestion would be that we, at each board meeting, at least put one of these priorities on the agenda for board discussion. And in that there's some interest in this area, then I would suggest that priority number 2 would be on the October agenda. That was a proposal I was gonna make later in the agenda, but that's, you don't need to react to it now, but that's just to give a little clarity of where I thought this could go.
Sounds good. Do you have any information on the readiness question? The percentage of Vermont schools ready to do SBAC?
I'm sorry,
Do
you're
you
talking
have
to me?
any information on the readiness
Well,
question?
again, why don't we,
In what regard, Margaret? In technology, what we got, we didn't get all the responses, but we had at least between 75 and 80% of the schools are eligible. The concern, I think there was a misunderstanding, is that there doesn't have to be one machine for every student. Remember, it's a 12-week window. So a school, and again, having run a school, as you have run a school, we can organize things and plan. So if I have 50 computers and I have 250 kids, we schedule it over that time period. So we anticipate that all schools will be pretty much ready, and if they're not, there will be the paper option for at least the first 2 years. And many schools, and this is something that people need to understand, schools sometimes choose the width of their broadband. Okay? So, again, having done this as a superintendent not that long ago, we had options of buying so much bandwidth at this price, or some schools are making choices to buy narrower bandwidth. That's a local decision that, no matter what we do at the state level, they ultimately have to budget for. But we anticipate that right now, we have about 80% of our schools, of those who answered, are ready for the SBAC assessment online. And what's even happened at the SBAC, which I think the federal government, and I don't know enough about parks, so I can't really talk about them, is that we've actually reduced the amount of graphics to ensure that it's not taking up too much bandwidth. But we were hoping that it would be and eventually it'll evolve to be a little bit more, have more graphics, but graphics take a lot of bandwidth. So there's that question right now. But we do anticipate that. And again, we had schools volunteering from all over the state. Rural schools in Northeast Kingdom and Windham County, as well as suburban and urban schools in Rutland, Chittenden County, and other places. So we have not been hearing from folks.
don't take that personally from Windham County. He didn't really mean that.
Didn't mean rural in Windham County?
We're getting that optic fiber all hooked up. We're just waiting on Silverman, but we're.
It's coming. All right.
No, and I wasn't talking about that. I was just talking about, it's rural and urban.
Let's just move on.
Yeah.
Why don't you continue with your report?
So that's pretty much it, and we continue to work on the EQS and work on several studies. Right now, I'm leading a study on the independent and private school, independent and public school question. Stephen is on that, Independent, yes, on the committee. And if anybody saw the Burlington Free Press, I had a big article about it. I felt, and I am going to have a letter to the Free Press. I think they sort of glossed over the special education issue. They glossed over a couple things and made it look like this, at least to me, it made it sound like this was pretty much a panacea, which I think the board has had some concerns. The article.
Can we get that article sent to us?
Angela, can we send, yep, it was in Sunday's Free Press.
I knew she was gonna run, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, Terry Hollenbeck was the one that, and she attended our last meeting. And the question is, and we have another meeting coming up, I think it's next week, where we will have some representatives. I'm reaching out to
She
folks
came
from.
down to North Bennington.
Terry did?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she was there because they have a parade at the beginning of the year every year. But we also will have folks from, I'm trying to get somebody from the Win Hall School Board to be available to give us their perspective, as well as other folks who may be from either North Bennington or Win Hall, the Academy, to give us their perspective on this whole issue. Again, I still believe that ultimately the special education issue, at some point, that will come up. And it's particularly, I'm concerned because I have had students in the past where they might have had 3 or 4 instructional assistants who needed 24-hour care. And in a public school that is somewhat confidential, if you're the only one in a private school, I think that might be, would violate those parents' confidentiality rights. So I'm very much concerned about this. And I'm also concerned that if this becomes a trend, it actually goes counter to, I think equity that folks are talking about. We're spending, don't need to get into this, but we spend a lot of money on administrative services. Just as a little side note, I'm talking to the Secretary, Mark Murphy from Delaware, state very similar to Vermont in size. They probably have about 1,000 more kids per grade. They have 16 school districts, 16 superintendents. He meets with every superintendent once a month. He understands everything that's going on, the challenges, how they can support. It would take me, a year to do that with the 63 that I have. So I think we have to look at a lot of these different issues. You all will have to look at, that's not going to be my role any longer. I will have the freedom as an individual citizen to say what I please, however, without having to worry about my role. So, but I think that's it, Stephen.
An interesting thing about the, I don't know if it was a resolution or legislation that created the Independent Study Committee. It calls for a very diverse group of people to serve on it, 15 or 16.
Oh, yes, good for you. Good.
But yet it concludes the resolution by saying the secretary, not on behalf of the committee, but the secretary shall submit a report to the legislature by a date certain. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
And the committee, I was very clear with them at the last meeting that it's my report, that it will be what I believe is the right thing. They can submit an addendum or something else if they don't agree with it. And also, and it's unfortunate that it's not about the benefits or positives of independent schools. Vermont independent schools have a long history in this state. They have served us well. But it has become a little bit of that when the question really was the concept of closing up a public school and in its place using the same teachers, the same staff, the same books, the same desks, the same chalk, everything, and now you're an independent school. That's the question. Unfortunately, it has grown, or it grew into this whole, the strengths of independent schools. We know the strengths of independent schools.
Well, and just so this board knows, I'm there as chair of the State Board of Education. And what I have said to date is that, yes, a prior board had some real hesitation about this process of creating an independent school in place of a public school. But more importantly, we thought that if this was a public policy that was going to be allowed to continue, that there needed to be some criteria for doing this, in that the current legislation for private schools were for private schools that were incidental to a public school.
Right.
So I think that's, this particular board has never taken a vote on it, but I think I've tried to represent the philosophy of the prior board and what I'm picking up and talking with you as individuals. So if you ever disagree with that, let me know. But as I said earlier, what I say doesn't necessarily have any meaning to the gentleman that's writing the report.
This will be coming back for the legislative agenda.
I looked, I was gonna wink, but I was a little slow on the uptake.
Bill?
This will be coming back for the legislative agenda in any case, so we'll be looking at that.
It will.
Terrific. Jean Marie?
I have a question about the the EQS standards, and it just occurred to me this last week in my work life, is that how will these standards affect programs like adult ed and the tutorial centers and students who are people who are in their early 20s, et cetera, looking to get a high school diploma? Do you know how that?
Bring Jill back up, or you
Yeah,
want
I don't.
I mean,
Jill, do
we
you
don't
wanna-
need to talk about it now, but it occurred to me in my work that someone who used to have an IEP at 24 that's trying to get a high school diploma, do we do proficiency versus seat time, and how do we get I mean, I don't know if this was talked about in your committee.
John, Jill?
Yeah, John, I mean, do you have any, I mean, we could talk about this later, but if there's some quick nugget that you can.
We can probably address it quickly. It did come up at various points, and I would say, within the education quality standards, but also I would add to that mix, just for the fun of it, Act 77, the flexible pathways do have a very positive impact on this, but does create that tension of an elastic band getting stretched every once in a while, which I think is a healthy tension to have the discussions as we make innovative change. Particularly for the adult ed group, it does bring proficiency as an option to that, and I know those, the contractors, for instance, that we award, Vermont Adult Learning, the Tutorial Center, Central Vermont Adult Basic Ed, and Northeast Kingdom Learning Services, manage a large part of that high school completion program for us. When they take Act 77 and the pending EQS rules, it does provide opportunities to create more authentic assessment of learning when we move towards a proficiency-based, and does allow us to start looking at how do we better use GED funds, how do we better use the adult diploma program, how do we use the federal adult ed and literacy grants, and how do we use the high school completion program to the full benefit. Those conversations have been started for the last 4 or 5 years anyway, as we move forward with the high school completion program. But with the EQS and Act 77, it does create better opportunities, does not hinder. There have been questions about that they now hinder the flow of funds and the use of those funds for services for students, and we just don't see that it's any hindrance at all. There's certainly the questions of what if, but it does create more opportunities for students. Act 77 took the age cap off of the high school completion program, for instance. It was at 21 or 22, I forget, and that was removed through the process of passing Act 77. So now it's anybody, regardless of age, that does not have a high school diploma can pursue the high school completion program in an innovative pathway to gain a high school diploma.
Can I ask
Thank
a
you.
question?
Yep.
So, not for right now, but a child over 22 who had special ed services as an adult, they no longer qualify for those. So that's where I see a bit of a disconnect in how does someone who struggled with an identified special ed need above 22, 23, which isn't that old,
Right.
how does that, I think at the same time we've created opportunities, we've created barriers. So if the idea is proficiency at what level, we still haven't really
Right.
decided. And I know Mark's got the law book in his hand, so he's gonna.
Just an observation, if I may. Section 165 specifically says that school quality standards, and I know the question has been, do the education quality standards supplant those school quality standards? But they apply to each Vermont public school, including each technical center. So I think with respect to comparable standards with respect to independent schools, approved programs, those have their own sets of rules, state board rules, that have been set, and they also have, in the case of independent schools, section 166. So the fundamental question is, does the EQS simply replace SQS, or is it broader?
To answer your question specifically, for those students over 22 that are no longer under IDA funding, for instance, the high school completion program, if they fall under that, which is in addition to the citations that Mark added, a graduation plan has always been a requirement under the high school completion program. So there's the opportunity to say that if you're older and you don't qualify for some of these support funds, the high school completion program can provide those support funds, but as importantly, at that age, and even for a traditionally enrolled student, from middle school onward, there's a transition planning piece so that the students start moving towards a greater sense of independence from those support services and create lifelong supports that move forward with them into the workforce. So the high school completion funds can support that work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move us on.
Can I just have one question for
Yes.
Armando? So just question on just updating, we talked about the assessment for SBAC, but more of the rolling out for, the idea of rolling out the standards and what the agency's doing to help in the teaching process, not just the assessment. Because I know I talked to a group of elementary school teachers and they were really feeling frustrated that they didn't feel like they had a lot of resources to them and they were going to other state websites to find the resources. So I just wondered if you could address that, just what the agency's doing and just for the teachers
Yeah.
to get the students to the assessments.
And I think, to be clear, let's start off, the agency can only do so much. These are local issues. As I did when I was a superintendent or principal, anytime the NECAP standards came out, we were given the standards, we had to then, through our professional development, set up those. At the state level, we have our website, we have information, there's actually a meeting, I think, Thursday on Common Core. We've had other meetings around the state for Common Core. We've been providing as much information as we get to the schools, but if they're frustrated, they should be looking at their own SUs as to why they may be not having the professional development that is preparing them for that.
I don't think it's the
And I'm not-
professional development, but it was more of the, they were going to other states and they could pull lesson plans and they could have exactly how to meet standards, and it was, they thought it was really helpful, and then they were getting frustrated that they couldn't find it on the Vermont website.
We have, I think, Angela, you want to? V squared has a,
He's alluding to, in terms of the meeting on Thursday, is his monthly roundtable, the video series, so where.
no, I'm not talking about that, Angela.
Oh, you're not?
No, I'm talking about a workshop on Thursday at the Capitol Plaza or on Common Core.
Oh, I thought you were also talking.
No, I'm not talking about that.
That is also, on the monthly video series, we were talking about Common Core.
But I think what
I was just trying to.
they're talking about, yeah.
The frustration is out, and I know there's the VE squared, but it's another website which you log into, and then teachers aren't finding that, so it's not something that's really known out in the teachers VE squared. So I was just curious what the agency.
And again, we have our weekly, and I don't want to sound defensive, but part of it is, we send out a weekly field memo and we expect everyone to get it. We tell principals and superintendents to make sure that all the teachers get it. That doesn't happen. How many times have I asked this? 100 times. I can't make it happen. Because it is a lot of information that is relevant to teachers, even though it may not necessarily be specific
Except,
to the
you
area.
know, we're talking here about management of the agency, which we no longer have
That's true.
responsibility
But is there
for.
a policy that we need to help then?
I see.
If Armando's running into a problem of getting information out there because of roadblocks of not.
You can write as many policies as you want. I mean, ultimately.
I'm just saying, like, it's
I don't
fun
need,
for
we don't
them.
need any more, honestly, we don't need any more policies. What we need is for people
We're
to
done here.
pass it on.
No.
And there are, I mean, I think that part of it is that, we do have, we don't have the capability to do lesson plans. That's not something that we have the ability to do. Many of these, we do share with other states, and they share with us. So, are there things that we could do better? Of course there are. But at the same time, ultimately, it does come down to locals. These are the standards. We're providing them information that they need to start working on implementing those.
Last question from Bill.
Okay, this is really a comment that comes from the national literature and what's being talked about in terms of the Common Core. If it has an Achilles heel, it's going to be this entire thing of professional development, capacity, and building it with teachers. That's been grossly underestimated, and whether we call it the state role or the local role, let's not get into that. But the thing is they don't have the resources. If they don't get the resources, it's not going to work. With school districts having an average of 5 in-service days per year, which are used for orientation and this and that and the other, that's not anywhere near the capacity that we really need. And I don't want to argue whether this is the policy direction or administrative direction, this is something that's going to hit us, and we really need to look at it.
This will be a very lively discussion at the October
Yeah.
meeting under priority number 2.
It's more than that. It's more than just the assessment. It's the capacity to carry the thing out.
I do want to say, though, that one of the things, and again, Bill, you were a superintendent, every teacher in your district gets either 3 or 6 credits through UVM, they use UVM rate for professional development. The districts can say, we want you to use this money now to take classes, workshops, whatever on the Common Core. The local educational agencies, the SEAs, the ESAs, are also, we've just given them, I don't know, John, a couple $100,000, $400 some odd $1,000 to work with districts to set up professional development. So I do think that locals do have the money within their budgets.
Let's not do this either-or thing. Let's talk about the capacity issue as it exists.
The capacity's there. They have the resources to be able to focus those resources on implementing.
I'm not
the Common
sure.
Core. That's okay. We don't have to agree. I'm just telling you that as a former superintendent, you know that you have a professional development line that has money.
Let's move on.
Okay.
I have a question about the October meeting. That day, that night, I'm going to Ghana, and I know that meeting is going to be at the home of the Teacher of the Year. So depending on where that is in the state, I may or may not be able to stay at that meeting.
Could we, we'll discuss that at the end of this
Sure.
meeting and
Yeah, that's
do
fine.
it.
I'm just
I'm going to go to agenda item.
Be all over the place is what you're saying. We don't know where it's going to.
a long way from the airport.
I didn't realize that.
Mr. Talbot, give us, we've all received a budget update for the first 2 months of the fiscal year.
And I know you've been looking forward to this item on the agenda with great excitement.
Yes, Doctor.
So, while I was away, my staff was gracious enough to print this report. It's a little different than the one I normally provide you. It has been pointed out to me that this one is easier to read. The numbers are simple. We're just under 17% of the year has been completed through August 31st, and just under 13% of the budget has been expended. Please note that the dues line of $19,750 has not hit yet, but if you spent at this same rate, you pay those dues, you'll be just a couple $1,000s over. Also note that there's an advertising line of $4,000 that we're hoping you won't need to use this year. But you do have a little room, so,
Bill?
yes.
Could I also just say that the cost for the EUS schools is flat.
Because we didn't have money, because we had used it.
And that's like $2,200.
Okay.
Secretary of State's advertising, Secretary of State's advertising costs.
Okay.
For rules.
Okay.
What
So-
rule?
So it's early, but you look like you're okay for now.
Okay.
Well, I have 2 questions. What's the time frame if we were to look at this budget and request a budget adjustment?
We haven't heard yet from the administration, but it will be coming up within the next 6 weeks, I think.
My second question is on FY14, that deadline is not passed?
No, we don't, no, budgets, they're still finishing the closeout, actually, but the budget discussions will happen soon. They usually start in October. I do have a report that shows you the detail of how you ended the year last year, so you can see where you were up and where you were down.
I would suggest that as a priority, that the legislative committee take the budget up, look and see if there are adjustments that we might request for FY14 that we're in now, and also look at this budget for FY15.
And I would be happy to meet with them if they need any technical assistance.
We will.
Just send us a check.
Well,
Any
can't do
questions
that,
for Mr.
but-
Talbot? If not, we'll take a break for lunch, and we will reassemble. Sorry?
Can I make one announcement? I should have done it during the public section.
Oh, too late.
We're not
Missed
public,
it.
so
You missed
that's
it.
all right.
You missed it.
Steve Dale from the School Boards Association. Just speaking for Jeff and myself, wanted to make sure the board understood that we're having our annual conference on the 23rd through the 25th of October. We will send you each an email that will outline what's happening quickly. The evening of the 23rd, which is Wednesday, 7:30 at night, there's a pre-conference presentation by Diane Ravitch, who's a well-known education expert and researcher. that's co-sponsored by the VSBA and Dartmouth. We encourage you to attend that. On Thursday and Friday, Thursday is focused on the agenda for world-class education that the two associations had put forward a few months ago, very consistent with your priorities and the governor's priorities. And the day will be focused on some school districts that are actively engaged in those practices, and there'll be a number of workshops and so on. And then on Friday, where the focus is on the cost of education and different ways of viewing that and different approaches that boards and superintendents may take to try to address some of the concerns that are being expressed in the legislature and elsewhere. So we hope you'll join us for any or all of that, and you will get an email about it shortly.
Thank you. I would suggest we adjourn till 1:15. When we come back, we'll take up the priorities. If the board is prepared, I would suggest that we adopt the priorities today with any changes that you might have. And there's one more remaining item, the last item. I think it's time for this board to have a conversation about the operations and functioning of this board. I would suggest to have an open and honest discussion, that we do that in executive session. However, I'm prepared to go about it in either way. But just to alert everyone how the rest of the meeting will proceed, I thought I'd tell you that now. So until 12:45, we're in recess. All right, we're on item L, work session on priorities. Going into this, I would encourage a full discussion, and if you're comfortable at the end of the discussion, that we approve them today. We've been working on it now for, I think, 3 meetings. One slight change in the agenda. Once we complete that, we'll spend a little time with Carol and looking at the October agenda, and then I was going to propose that we go into executive session to discuss an update on the search and board operations. So, you've got a new draft from Margaret. I think it's dated September 3rd.
So since that new draft, Bill actually sent me some language, and there's been a few suggested changes, but they only impact the first page. So I do have a September 16th update from yesterday, but it's just a change in the first page. And so I'll send that around.
Do you want these to go out there?
I made that many copies, so it can, but I don't know how many more I need.
Or we can share.
Is there a copy machine?
I've got one more.
You have one more
I
to
don't
send
know
out?
if there's a copy machine here.
Let me go, there might be.
I'm sorry, Carol, I would have sent it to you, but we only did it yesterday.
This should be fun.
Margaret, why don't you tell us where the changes are?
Okay, so I believe that, and maybe we should talk about this achievement gap one, but I believe that that is exactly same. And I don't know if anyone wants to suggest this issue to do with free food service programs as something that should be a priority that might address achievement gap. I don't know if we want to add something like that. But the change is in priority 2, the actions in priority 2. The language is slightly changed.
So, so everything in priority 1 is exactly the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The challenge with it is making the language specific enough and clear enough so that we know what we actually are doing as a board in terms of supporting and prioritizing. And if you look at the first iteration to this one, we've gone through 7 drafts now since the June retreat. This is draft 8, and it's all been trying to get us there, but I don't know that we're quite there yet.
So what are the changes in priority 2?
Okay, well, the first one is to just slightly articulate it, in that we have this Vermont framework of standards, and what we would like to do is add the Common Core and the science standards to create a Vermont framework of standards that includes the new materials, rather than just say we're tossing out Vermont standards and we're doing the Common Core. It's to create a Vermont document that includes the best of, through a process of the science standards, the new science standards, and also what Common Core, we can learn from Common Core, inform the Vermont standards, and create one document that still includes things like the vital results, which Vermont felt was very important in terms of our original standards. So I think that first one sort of clarifies that a little bit. Can you read it, please? Yes. Oh, Carol, do you not have a copy? Sorry. I'll send.
Here, I'll give her mine.
Okay. It just says, encourage the AOE to work with practitioners from the field to revise the Vermont Framework of Standards and Learning Opportunities to include CCSS and new science standards in one document.
Reaction from the agency first? I realize it's been very quick, but
It's underway. We're working on that what I refer to as the Unified Vermont Framework of Standards, which will include the pre-existing Vermont Framework of Standards, the new Common Core State Standards, and now the next-gen science standards, the vital results, which is informed, that I think, a couple of changes from the US document.
but that's okay for us if we have policy, you know.
Oh, no, and this one's okay. I'm looking at the third bullet, the accountability principle.
It isn't just a Common Core conversation, it is the Vermont Framework of Standards conversation, and that we own that, and Common Core is a part of that.
So this wouldn't counter anything you're this would be supportive of what you're currently doing?
Yes.
Okay.
You could call it a unified union of standards.
What do these guys use? A mud, whatever.
Unified
So,
framework
so
of
folks are
standards.
okay with the new proposed language in bullet 2?
And then,
Bullet 3?
I guess I'm not sure about bullet 2.
okay, so I'll read that one.
Yes.
Oh, I thought that-
Comprehensively review the Vermont assessment and accountability system in order to provide a balanced system which does not disproportionately rely on standardized tests. I think that's looking at the whole picture of assessment and looking at performance assessment as an integral part in the system, particularly in support of personal learning plans and multiple
Proficiency.
pathways and proficiency. And as that becomes available to be incorporated, perhaps there'll be an opportunity to have less reliance on standardized testing.
I guess the question I have is that's exactly what we're working towards, a comprehensive accountability system that is not just a single measure of an assessment.
Great.
However, it has to be in line with the federal government. So no matter what we do here, but that's why we didn't go for the race to the top, that's why we didn't go for the waiver, because we wanted a comprehensive system that included some of the things that you've listed and others. But the federal government said, you can do whatever you want as a statewide system, but for us, it has to be graduation rates and a standardized assessment. So we said, we're not gonna participate in that. So I think whatever we do has to be, whether I like it or not, we have to be aligned with the federal government's requirements, the law.
I think this is to make a robust effort to make sure we're in as much balance as we can so that the onslaught of standardized testing doesn't direct change in schools to the point where this is lost, so that there's balance in the system.
We need a couple more up here, Carol.
And again, I don't want to, I think onslaught may be a little bit too strong a word, but we're trying to find a balance between what we have to do by our own statutes that says that we will have an accountability system based on the kneecap or whatever, but it's robust, so it includes not only graduation rates, attendance, SBAC scores, classroom assessments, the courses kids take, all those things. That's what so that is consistent with that. My only point, Margaret, was that we have to also, it has to be consistent with, hey, you took mine?
It was more copies of the old one.
Oh. It has to be consistent with I think to a certain extent with the
Right.
federal government. That's all I'm saying. I agree with
So
you.
it's not, it's, the way it's written is not out of line with anything that you're currently doing.
No. Or we'll be expanding on it.
Stacy?
I'm wondering about.
Carol, here's draft 8.
Carol, I think did you make the right comment?
No, she didn't. This, what we're looking at is
Oh,
is
did I give
dated
you the wrong one to copy?
September
Oh, I'm
16th.
sorry.
How
Here,
did
see,
you do
it says
that?
draft
It wasn't
8.
attached.
Oh, I see. How'd she do that?
I already have this one.
Got the right one.
I had to, but I had to
Okay,
peel that off.
back to order here.
Add it. Must have had it.
Stacy?
So I'm kind of zooming out and I'm thinking about the conversation we're going to have next about how we function as a board. And I'm thinking like even this conversation between Margaret and Armando is so helpful and kind of seeing like, I think I'm still wondering a little bit about how we function as a board. And before we make more of an effort towards these wonderful priorities, which I love, I think I'm a little bit hesitant to put so much of my passion and emotion in this, not still being totally clear about how we function. And I'm wondering if anybody else is feeling that way, and if so, should we juggle our agenda in some ways and get some clarity as a group on that before we keep going with this?
Well, I must admit, being in charge of this has been daunting because in June, what we did was collaborative and I was comfortable. But since then, I don't feel it's been collaborative. I feel like I've been making changes as they've come in. One person here, one person there, and it might look contradictory. I've tried to avoid that, but it hasn't been as collaborative. And I wasn't a committee. I was an individual on it.
Oh, sorry, I by no means mean to.
Yeah.
I hope that didn't come across that
No,
way,
no,
not
it
blame at
didn't.
all.
It didn't,
Just
but-
recognizing that the board is, there are a lot of us who are new, and the board's in a different, operates in a different way vis-à-vis the rest of the government, the agency, whatever, than it did years ago. And so that's the dynamic, certainly nothing that something you've done or not done. I think I love everything you've done, it's all good.
Well, maybe a middle ground would be to go through this, maybe not take a vote on it today, put this on the October, but, I mean,
First thing on October.
sure.
Just get it done.
This has to lead into the legislative priorities too, so we can't wait too late.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm certainly willing to defer it if that's the will of the board, but I am eager to get this wrapped
Right.
up.
Well, the big philosophical thing in my mind is, do we set out what we think is the best policies for the board? And here, I mean writ large, basically not restricting the definition of policy to formal rules, but rather to a vote of the board is a policy issue by definition. And then, I guess the thing that I would say is that we should do the best thing for education for the state of Vermont and then go negotiate with the feds based on what we believe rather than the other way around. Maybe we win, maybe we lose. But nevertheless, stand on those principles.
So you would argue then, as I hear that, is that leave this, I guess, bullet number 2 as is, and not add the language that in line with federal law and regulation?
I would leave it as September the 16th, I
As
believe.
is, yeah.
And I guess the question
But
I
is
would
that
have,
the will
Bill,
of
who would
everybody
be,
else?
who would be arguing and fighting with the feds and all this time? It would be the agency that would have to spend all this time doing it. So I think that's where there's an
I
incongruence.
don't think that's our problem. Our charge is to come up with the best policy for education for the state of Vermont, period.
And again, I have a question about I'm still stuck on policy, rules, and statute. We as a board have policy ability. That, to me, means nothing, really. Unless it's a rule, you have no authority. So if you're talking policy
No,
and
any motion of this
rule,
board becomes a definition of policy. Since there's no definition of policy in the law, we decide that.
but I don't think that I would, and I'm not gonna be the secretary, so that'll be somebody else dealing with this, that I would see a board that voted on a policy as anything that directed the agency or the state to do anything. If it was a rule, that's where I believe, I think my understanding is the State Board of Education has authority over the rules.
I see your point, but I think it too narrow, and I don't.
Well, I don't think it's too narrow. I think it's actually something that as an agency, we don't necessarily agree with the direction that you're taking, I don't think it's narrow. I think actually.
Well, this is a good example of the new rule.
That's right, that's exactly, this is a good conversation, by the way. That's a good conversation.
To follow this, and, I mean, just if the board felt strongly about this, and the agency felt that they couldn't do it or disagreed with it, then you're right. The board has two choices. The board could adopt a rule and go through that process. Agency might oppose the board in that process. And/or we could go to the legislature and get a law implemented. But I think you're both right, that from a philosophical point of view, we establish the policy, and how we put that into effect may vary from issue to issue.
Yes.
And there may be times that the agency say, hey, all right, we join you on that, and we're gonna do it on their own, or help us with the rule. Or if they concluded that they couldn't support this particular policy, then we'd have to move ahead with a rule or a law change. But, I mean, this is untested waters.
Yes, it is.
But I certainly welcome, for one board member, welcome that when the board is looking at language like this, I want to get the agency's reaction to it, and in the end, I may disagree in the end, or the board may disagree, more importantly. So I think that's where we're at.
So on this particular issue, are you suggesting, Armando, we add that language about in compliance with No Child Left Behind?
Well, I think my duties and your duties as sworn board members is to uphold and follow the laws of our state and our country. So I think to put something in here that would go counter to what the law specifies would put you all in when you signed your board appointments, to maybe step outside of that. So I'm just saying that all I can.
So.
Okay, we can all obviously disagree, Bill.
We can say, this is the position of our boards. We'd like for you to change your interpretation to do this. Maybe they say yes, maybe they say no. But unless we make the statement, then we're not doing anything.
And Bill, you think that we haven't for the last 2 years been making that statement on a regular basis to the federal government? And what it has meant is hours upon hours upon hours and hours of extra work for a depleted agency. To the end, no change or not participate. So I think that what you're seeing, you get together once a month, you sit around the table and you talk about, we deal with this on a daily basis, every day, all the time. So I think that there's a difference between where you sit and where I'm currently sitting. And again, your new secretary may have a completely different perspective on it, but right now is, unless it's something that adheres with the law, I have no other choice but to go along with it. I can fight it, I can push it, but at a certain point, as the Secretary of Education, I have to do what the law requires. So we can push back, and we do, Bill. And I'm not, and again,
you have.
And I actually find these discussions I think these are things that should have probably happened before this change occurred. As you know that, I mean, we've talked about this, as opposed to after the fact. Our elected officials chose to pass a law that did not provide us with a better direction. So here we are having interesting, sometimes disagreeable discussions, but still at a professional level that needs to be worked out. So these are all good conversations, by the way. So I don't look at these in any way other than you having a position, my having a position, Charmarie, Mark, anybody else having a position, and then talking about it. So we're laying the foundation for future boards and secretaries to follow.
Stacy.
So just to go back to kind of that conversation from this morning about the different lenses, I think, Armando, I definitely appreciate the idea of it must be very frustrating, or if not frustrating, at least it must be challenging or at a complexity to have this dynamic of the people who are there every day with it and the people who come once a month. Probably not that dissimilar to teachers on the ground in the classroom and a superintendent or whatever. But those different lenses are going to be really important, especially if we are all depleted or here on volunteer time or whatever. And so if we can't value what the different lenses bring together, then I think we're really missing the mark. And so I guess I would hope that the benefit of having the people who come once a month is we do look at it differently. It doesn't make it easy, but I think that difference is part of what's going to maybe allow us to work in concert. I think I certainly appreciate the idea that, you know, it's not, whatever what I want to say. I don't want, I understand where the people who are there every day working on it, where it's frustrating. I guess in me just even reading this little phrase, it doesn't say do whatever you want to, we expect the agency to fight this to the death. It's just, we want a comprehensive review or something. Like, it's not saying someone does or doesn't have to do something vis-a-vis the law. It's let's just review it, and for our own sake, keep an eye on this balance, because it's important to us because of what we know is good for kids. I don't know that it has to be so fraught with so much tension.
No, and I agree. I mean, again, what Margaret is, at least in the second bullet, is exactly what we put in our waiver request about looking at multiple measures to determine student, school, and state success or challenges. And we will continue to do that, and we're still working on that for our own state accountability. What we're trying to do is, I think what Bill is suggesting, is how do we get the federal government to look at a more comprehensive model instead of single one assessment on a particular day or week or whatever it is, making a determination whether I'm a good student, a good teacher, a good school, or a good state. What I do think needs to be added in there is something that says that we will have these things, and maybe not or, but and ensure that we're following federal legislation. Maybe that and, as opposed to an or.
Can I make a suggestion? What about because Stacey, just what you said, what if you just leave it as beginning, comprehensively review the Vermont Assessment Accountability System, period, and leave out the other piece, so that we're gonna review the system, we're not, because this has a value judgment, what we're reviewing it for, but just reviewing the system, wouldn't that kind of take care of all of this? That's the intent of the board, if we're gonna review it. And I think it's the board to come up with a decision. This kind of has a decision for us already made that feels a little bit uncomfortable.
Okay.
Because not everybody has decided as a board that's how we feel.
Yeah.
But I think the review piece, that's where the will of the board
So
comes in.
bullet 2 would read, under your proposal, which I'm taking as a motion, comprehensive review the Vermont Assessment Accountability System.
Period.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there a second to that motion?
Is this a motion?
She made a motion, yes. Ruling of the chair. Are you challenging the chair?
Never. Why would I do that? I'll second it.
Okay. Further discussion on that proposed amendment? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Okay. The third bullet is new also, Margaret?
It's changed a little bit. Adopt accountability policies applicable to all programs and schools based on a comprehensive set of school indicators, which reduces the reliance on test scores and as a school evaluation technique. I think this is in line with EQS, and, right now in the school report cards, most of the data is test-related, and this is supportive of a broad, comprehensive set of data, all kinds of data, such as the TEL survey or whatever else people have to paint a more comprehensive picture of a school and school quality indicators, rather than just the use of standardized test scores to evaluate and show details about how schools are performing.
I think a key word in this is you've used the word reduces the reliance,
Yeah.
as opposed to eliminating or, which would lead us back to the prior
There's always going to be
conversation.
standardized test scores. That's one measure, and that's fine. It's one measure, but to paint a broader picture using EQS of school quality is, I think, supportive of what we're all trying to do, rather than just highlight, oh, you're a failing school because 19 children didn't do well on this test on a said day last October.
Everyone comfortable with bullet number 3? Stacy, I've not forgotten your suggestion earlier about, well, let's see if we can go through it and see where we are at the end and see if people want to vote on it today or wait.
Well, I think we even kind of brought some light to it, even as the conversation went further, so it's okay.
So there's bullet 4 under, no.
Yeah.
So how
Well, it's
many
on the other
bullets
page.
are
Bullet
under
4 is still the
priority
same.
Oh, yeah.
two? Are there 5?
Yes.
There are three now under priority 2, those 3 that we just went over.
And that's
There
it?
are no more.
And so you would strike
Strike the others.
the develop policy and require
Yeah,
schools?
it's already
So that page
repeated.
stayed the same?
People comfortable with that?
Does the, just a question, I mean, bullet 5, in the
Yeah.
previous.
Wait a minute.
If you go to the original one,
Yes.
so you go to, not the one that Carol just passed out, but our original one, there's, I understand bullet 4, the develop a policy, blah, blah. The next one that requires schools to report, that currently is school report, it's a law, but this maybe goes a little further?
Well, she's proposing that we strike.
Right, no, but
Okay.
I think that's a good one. Does that one fall into 1, 2, or 3? I guess I'd say that that's a good bullet.
Yeah, I wanted the idea of us to use the EQS, which we're putting a lot of work into, as a broad measure of school quality. And that when we report to the public, we use those broad measures of school quality, not just standardized test
Right, but
scores.
do you want it, but Margaret, I guess my question is, are you eliminating in the new, is that 5th bullet eliminated, or is it still in there?
Well, I don't want to eliminate or add anything. What I was trying to do was take what people were sending me and incorporate it into here. So yesterday, Bill sent me some things, I incorporated them, and I don't know if that means tossing the others out or
Oh, I
keeping
see,
them
I
in.
get it, I understand,
Right?
okay. I get the impression that we were taught that it was only now 3, because I like this 5th bullet.
So keep number 5.
And does it say what you wanted to say with the EQ, I mean, it does have the EQS component in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so bullet number 4 under priority 2 is eliminated.
Yeah, and we're
Yes.
keeping
Okay,
5.
everyone
Yeah.
comfortable with that?
So there's a total of 4 now.
4 bullets.
4 bullets.
And then I guess the other question that I have would be, and this, I'm not sure if this is something that gets flushed out a little bit more, when it talks about, require schools to report to the public on the quality of education through a broad and inclusive set of measures. Do we want to name what that broad and inclusive set of measures are, so that there's consistency, whether I'm in Burlington or South Burlington or Winooski, that we're all measuring, the number of honors course the kids take, the number of hours kids volunteer, whatever it is that,
I think it would be helpful.
it would be helpful, wouldn't it? Yeah, it'd
Yeah,
be
but-
easier from a school perspective.
Yes.
But I think this is a broad policy.
Right, I'm just saying
And
that,
then at some point when we develop it,
That's-
we would articulate what those are.
An EQS defines what the list could be.
yes, yeah, that's all I wanted to find out. I just wanted to make sure that there was gonna be a list later on that articulated what schools, or whatever we called broad,
Okay, so
Measures.
no changes in priority 1. We've made, we've got 4.
Actually,
Oh,
I wasn't gonna hold us up, but under priority 1, I would like to see if we can put something in there under research or investigate or do something in regards to free food service for all kids, because it seems
Yeah.
like the data is there, that's a game changer.
So how is this language? Support policy to expand school food service programs to be a free service for all students. If I add
What
that,
did you got? Support.
Under 1,
Yes.
at the bottom on
You'd
one,
add a new, so you'd end up with
Another
2,
bullet.
4, 6, you'd have 7 bullets under
policy to
number 1.
expand school food service programs to be a free service for all
I
students.
realize for a broader discussion, it may be early for that, so, but to get it on the radar, to get that conversation going.
and then the goal, the
Something like
individual
that.
goals, like over the, in the next 5 years, we're gonna do X, in the next 7 years, this will happen, but, so that's where it gets
And
flushed
you
out.
wanna,
Like
did you wanna,
2 or 4.
did you wanna put in here, and all such food shall be purchased from the Green Peppers Restaurant?
Yes, or said sub-area.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, support policy to expand school food service programs to become a free service for all students.
Margaret, I'm assuming you're gonna do another draft after today.
Number 9.
Okay.
gonna give it back to you.
Everyone's comfortable,
Don't worry about it.
everyone's comfortable with the free food, okay? Priority 3. First of all, is there any proposed changes to that?
Bullet number 2, just because these are local decisions about whether schools, districts have students on the local boards or not. Some do, some don't. What we're now, we're basically trying to say that they will all have it.
Right.
And then, you know, the whole issue of, and what about those that don't want to? I mean, those are,
Is this one of the things, though, that the legislature could address with a law?
Actually, they already have a law.
They do? What's
doesn't
it?
mandate it, does it, Bill? Doesn't mandate it, does it?
It's the, just
Mandates
the,
8 hours a
Yeah.
year for leadership, training with board members.
What is it, no, but for students, Mark, does it have some?
Oh, excuse me, I think I'm wrong.
Oh, okay, I mean, it does have something about students in there, but it
Says
doesn't.
student, I'm thinking of the state board statute, not,
Oh.
I don't think there is a state.
There is not, nothing, there's not
No,
even
I
a
don't
mention
think
of it? I thought,
This isn't your issue, that this is your issue?
okay,
But it's never
Well, not.
okay, okay.
Correct.
Okay, I thought there was something in there that encouraged local boards, but didn't require it. Okay, okay.
Okay. So it could be on a legislative agenda.
Well, and in fact, here's a good example of what I was saying earlier, that, you know, we philosophically support this idea, but to affect it, we'd have to do it through you know, through the law or through a regulation.
Right.
And I guess in that first bullet, do we want to be so prescriptive in saying that students need to be involved in the PLPs and multiple pathways, or just that we want students involved in major decisions? I don't know, that's, because when you're limiting it at that point to those, and I know, was it Morgan, you're involved with the PLP, aren't you on the committee?
I'm not, no,
You're
I
not.
didn't have the time to
Okay.
commit to that.
So, I mean, that's, do we want to limit it to those?
How are we limiting it? I'm not.
Well,
reading.
just that it says that encourage the agency of education to require student involvement on all levels in the development of effective personal learning plans and multiple pathway models. Do we need that last part? Or just encourage the agency to involve students in all of the different levels? Or is it just those initiatives we want students involved in? That's just my question for the board.
I would put the word especially in, maybe.
This is the agency, okay, I think that, you know, I think that that's probably an area that we don't involve students as much as we could in. I don't want to say that, I would say that would become logistically difficult for us, even right now, in like our bullying and harassment task force, where we have students. It didn't work this year, we're having actually to go back to a different model because all-day meetings or meetings are in Montpelier or whatever, it becomes really hard logistically. We can't have all our meetings in schools, so I think just being careful about the reality of what that means, maybe, I mean, philosophically, it makes sense, it sounds great, but practically may be difficult. Unless anybody else in the agency has any thoughts on it.
I hesitate to raise my hand again.
No, go ahead. No, why? Go.
Well, I guess two things. One is I like the word encourage. I mean, I think that maybe just offers some.
Yeah, that may be.
We encourage, and you guys, we encourage, the board encourages the agency, and the agency encourages students, and it doesn't say like 9 students for 4 hours. It's not that specific. But I think what's tempting in places where people try to incorporate student voice is that with all the good efforts, adults tend to make all the plans and then are so excited to present to the students, here are your opportunities for voice, and we've kind of missed that those are the very people who should be the part of making the plans. And so what I like about that being here is, although I'm sure logistically it's a nightmare, if we could find, whether it's like 2 nighttime meetings in the course of the year, whatever it is, where you could get that student input in the planning, not just in the participation.
But that's probably a little too specific for a policy document.
Agree, but that's, I guess, why.
Our student has his hand up.
Mark. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Lachlan.
Mark, you have some clarification?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that under 558, it says a legal voter in a school district shall be eligible for election to a school board. So if you wanted to,
That's right.
so you would be limited to that. You could have a student who was over the age of 18 who was a legal voter.
Or could you not have 17 with 18 by the age of the
By
next
the time
general?
of the general election.
Because I registered as a voter.
But if you wanted to do it the way I think that you were thinking about it, you would need to amend that.
Well,
Why?
why? Yeah.
I mean, just, again, this is just a broad policy statement.
And there are many
That we
boards,
support that student representation is required.
It would require.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and to fulfill the policy statement, we would have to do,
I don't agree, I don't disagree.
and there are actually many boards that currently have students, but they're not voting members of the board, but they're on the board, and their opinions are valued and encouraged. So you can have that without any law change, right?
Well, but they're not,
Yeah.
they're not members of the school board in the statutory sense, but certainly having their voices there, I know it's a common practice, it's a good practice.
But what you're just saying is that the law says that in order to be
well,
a...
yeah.
Gotta be a
And
legal
that-
voter.
But that doesn't matter, because we're setting a broad policy statement here. Lachlan?
All right, so a couple things. Going back to the priorities, I know some of you guys are probably familiar with Adam Fletcher, but he's done this thing called the Ladder of Student Involvement in Schools, and there's 8 steps. The first 3 being categorized as degrees of non-involvement for students. So that's anywhere between adults manipulating students in decision-making or adults tokenizing students in decision-making. And then 4 through 8, which is the integration of students and involvement in decision-making practices, with like the ultimate goal, I guess, being number 8, student-led decision-making with shared with adults, student-adult partnerships, which is tough to like achieve on most fronts. But some of the lower levels that are still involvement, adult-led decision-making with students assigned to respond. I'm, in addition to being on this board, also on the high school board as like an administrator, basically. I sit next to the principals and I give like a 2-minute report every other Monday. And I sit there for an hour and a half while they talk about their budget.
Can you vote?
I cannot vote.
Well, apropos of the law.
Yeah, before the law, right.
I mean, it's just the way they do it. They just like have assigned student council as a.
Careful there.
It ran out of chair.
So yeah, student council. We get a report right next to the career center person, and that's how it's done. I think that a school board or a state board, regardless of what it is, can only be as good as the information that it receives. And I think that any school board that does not have authentic student voice is missing out on what goes on inside their schools. And I think there are plenty of school boards that do miss out on that. And I think that we're not only are we, not getting students as involved as we could be, we're not helping school boards build the best schools that they could.
Well, do you agree that with the language that Margaret has here now, and certainly in bullet 2 and 3, states a pretty clear policy that this board believes in increasing student participation in local school boards?
I think we should continue to support that. Obviously, we've supported that in putting students on the State Board of Education. And I think if we're going to go that far, why not go farther? We're one of 2 states in the country that does that. Why not
Yeah,
be the
okay.
first that does it all the way around?
So you're comfortable with the existing language?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm also very pleased with the 4th one. Ken talked about that today. My dad used to be a college, like an adjunct college professor for a couple of years. He said people would come in for grade alterations and they'd threaten him with the, if they didn't get the grade alteration they wanted, and on the professor feedback, they'd put negative stuff. That goes on in colleges all the time, even at like Ivy League institutions, yet they still trust students to like in the end be given that power. I think that we can trust high school students to do the same thing and give honest feedback about their teachers and have that be used.
Okay. We didn't wrap up bullet number 1, did we? Are people comfortable with that?
I like what, I think I liked what Stacey was saying about encourage the, we're talking about encourage the AOE. Encourage the AOE, I don't like the word require. I think to encourage the AOE to include student involvement or whatever the terminology is.
Okay, trying to include.
Yeah.
You like
In terms of the last bullet.
Wait a minute, let's finish up on this one first, sorry, Margaret. What are we substituting for require?
Include.
Include, yes, include would be a better.
To include student involvement.
Ladder step 5, or
Okay.
whatever. Step
And
five.
in the last bullet, there are many schools that have systems where students
Yep.
give feedback, but that feedback goes just to the teacher.
That's right.
It's not used by the administration in any way. So there's flexible ways to do this without it becoming part of an evaluation system, for example.
Okay.
And I would say let the schools deal, that's a local decision how they want to handle it. Yep, but this is good.
All right, let's move on to priority 4, develop policies to support effective leadership at all levels.
Is there anything, I mean, no kidding aside, is there anything in there about reducing the number of superintendencies that we need? Because we have a huge, I mean, that's one of the ways that we have better leaders in our schools, maybe by reducing the number of superintendencies that we have
Well,
in the state.
I think we've allowed for that under the 4th bullet, continue to monitor and take board action to implement 153 and 156.
Yep.
And isn't that priority 7 also?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
because
think
that's
so.
the one we added last
Okay.
time.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not hearing any objections or comments on priority 4.
Could I just say, I mean, I actually, the 5th bullet, where it says continue to monitor and take board action to implement 153 and 156, and maybe it's a separate bullet, or it maybe doesn't go here, and to encourage our legislators to add clearer benefits or, what's the word that they, incentives. Because I think right now, the incentives that are in Act 153 and 156 are somewhat nebulous to the average person.
Well,
I don't know if that fits there or not.
Well, it does, but I would argue that, again, this is a policy statement. That may be one of the details
Okay,
that
okay.
enact,
Yep.
that further the policy, but this is a.
Okay,
yeah?
all right, thanks.
Number 5, support educational improvement efforts. There are, I'm getting lost here, 1, 2, 3 bullets. Okay, not hearing any comments?
And just, I want to say something to bullet number 2, Krista, I think goes along with what you were talking,
Yeah,
Krista was
it
talking
does.
about, how do we encourage teachers to be more engaged with the agency, even though we can't pay them? Is there something we can do about providing professional development credits or something, or hours at least that go towards that, to get some, so that, I wanted to just say
Yeah.
that.
So, I mean, because we were talking about, it's just, teachers will do anything if you give them credits or if you give them hours towards their relicensure. And we'll stay up to 3 in the morning and keep working on something, even though we're up till 10:30 grading, we'll keep doing more. But it's that little bit of incentive. That's why we're teachers. We're really good at reaching those boundaries, right? And so if you want something done and to encourage it is somehow to incentivize it and make that if you go on and create this curriculum and put it up and it's accepted as good curriculum or good, just even coursework, that will give you hours for the work that you've done. And so something like that is, I think, is a low-cost way of really reaching out and getting high-quality teachers working together collaboratively. Because otherwise, there's just not a lot of time. So unless you have an incentive to do it and to reach out to someone working in another district and you get some sort of reward out of it, otherwise it could feel, I'm just doing this, it's going to go in some desk at the Agency of Education. So just honoring the professional work that teachers do with some way through credit or through credit hours.
So what would be the mechanism for approving that? Would it be the standards board?
No, so I mean, that would be if you're giving hours, I can go to a workshop.
Right.
And if I go to a workshop and they can give me so many hours, I was there, I was working.
So you're suggesting the agency does that for teachers who work on task forces
Yeah.
or
Yes,
whatever?
yeah.
Okay.
And even if it's Common Core and you're coming up with a great lesson or making some connections, 'cause all these things are happening in isolation all around the state. And there's no one way we can all come together and I can go click somewhere and see what are the teachers, what are they doing in Middlesex, or what are they doing up in Newark, or what are they doing in LI. It's just, there's no mechanism for that. There's no sharing mechanism. And it's really, I think, stifling the innovation and growth that could happen, because there are all these pockets of amazing things, and I'll go to workshops and hear what people are doing. I'm like, oh, why have I not heard this before? There's no mechanism to have that sharing happen.
And I think that is great. I'm just wondering about what's the quality control mechanism So say I submit a unit that I've worked hard on to V2 squared, who looks that it does comply with, who looks at that to make yes, you spent 8 hours on it, here's your thing that you've spent 8 hours. I mean,
Again, I think we're getting into detail.
Detail we
It's
don't know.
it's not the broad
But if we have
policy.
the
Okay.
big
That's a
policy,
good question,
maybe
though.
Yeah, I don't mean to take anything away from the conversation. It's just, I'm trying to get us through the broad policy statement here.
So should it say something different, Krista, to do what you're talking about?
You're talking about bullet number 2 and priority 5, is that right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to get lost here, so that's why I keep.
Do you want to say something about, something?
The policy statement's there, and I read it broadly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I-
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I read it, that's why I brought it
All
up.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine.
I do too.
Okay, and there's there's a third bullet on priority 5 on the top of the next page. I think that's pretty clear. Not hearing anything, priority 6, 5 bullets.
What are the two words, in-state? Is that,
What is that?
the board will in-state?
What is that?
Are we on number
Will
6?
No, we're
in-
not.
Six
No.
bullet 1.
Six
Oh,
bullet one,
six bullet
in
one.
state policy and
In-state
development.
policy, sorry. In-state
As in,
policy
like-
development.
I don't know, you put a pause after you read, I'm trying to,
Read it correctly.
like, yeah, it's, the
Thank you.
board will in state,
Policy
yeah,
development.
while, like,
I need better
while in.
pronunciation,
Maybe it
accent in
should be
my.
better, said better.
See, if you were from above Route 4, you would get that.
Okay. I'm from the south
represents all of southern Vermont,
corner.
I'm not hearing any suggestions.
Just a quick question on the last
Carol
one.
has her hand up.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, so
Go
just
ahead.
on the last one, support the agency of education to promote awareness. I mean, is that policy or are we just promoting awareness and support? Do we need to include the agency of ed in there? I know it's kind of a minute detail, but
Just promote awareness and get rid of the first bit?
because isn't the policy promote awareness and support
Yep.
for the
Yeah.
potential?
I see what you're saying.
So we'll take
Take out
support.
support, the AOE too.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Carol, you had your hand up?
I wanted a little clarification on the board budget, whether that, bullet, excuse me, whether that is outside of the,
Right.
Meeting?
public
Talking about-
comment.
I think
Yes,
that's what
yeah.
Jill's already doing, right? This is,
Yes, but is this, are you gonna hold regional meetings to gather input on EQS?
One
Isn't
of
that
the
what
things
Jill's
I think
doing?
we need to do, and this would be a good area to do it, maybe not the full board, but there needs to be a little outreach on part of this board. So, yes, I would look at that and say, that there might be 3 or 4 board members that would, God, they might even come to southern Vermont. And be part of the EQS hearing, or they might attend a superintendent's association meeting or something.
Okay, so could you change the word hold to attend or participate? or-
Yep.
So
Yep.
attend regional.
We're attending Because I think hold is.
Okay.
attend, yeah.
Okay, that's good. I mean, are we attending other meetings or convening meetings?
Both,
Your vision?
both.
Now, when do we hit the road, or when does the hearing start for the EQS as part of the rulemaking process?
It's
October.
already been
October.
scheduled, right?
Jill,
October 8th,
Oh, it's 8?
11th, 12th, and the 21st, I believe. The window is October 8th to October 28th.
and in different parts of the state, right?
Orleans, Heinsberg, and Brattleboro.
I think the idea to me is to
CVU.
harmonize with those activities
Yeah.
and attend those meetings and so forth, but the rulemaking thing is the big piece of action here.
I got to tell the story. I've told it a couple times already today, that Jill sent me the email telling me when the 3 dates were, And in the email, it set out in these two supervisory unions that we were being welcomed graciously and no charge. Brattleboro was charging $75 to attend a hearing down there. And I happened to be in Nova Scotia with a buddy of mine who's chairman of the school board. So about 6:30 in the morning, I hit it with him, and I said, hey, showed him the email, no one else is being charged, why are you doing that? So I negotiated a deal with them that we're not paying the $75.
Good.
You didn't force them in breaking board policy or school policy on a facility use. did you?
Well, it was funny, because 2 or 3 of the other people that were in the group live in Brattleboro, and they said, wait a minute, this is our taxpayers' money you're spending.
You should probably at least pay for janitorial
Yeah.
services.
Anyway, I'm sorry to take your time.
Jill?
I was wondering why you didn't charge him for this honor.
Jill, if you have the dates, maybe you can see who can come to those meetings. I already let you know I wasn't able
Oh,
to.
wait, yeah.
I'll be the one in Brattleboro.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be at CVU.
Yeah.
Sounds like you need somebody to go to Orleans.
He's
Yeah.
a neat
Yeah,
guy. A real community guy.
I can't do that Orleans date.
When is the Orleans?
Who, what?
You did.
I thought he was going.
I should have it on my list. I was just going to add, just back in relation to the overall broader priority discussion, if I may be as bold as to offer that, I'm certainly not declaring victory on EQS yet, but we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on the way that it's been handled and the input we've taken from stakeholders all along. And, we had monthly meetings with you folks. There was a lot of back and forth. And so I would just offer that as far as developing a communications strategy that I or any of us at the agency could sort of provide you folks with that template for any time you have these kind of statewide outreach, because it seemed like a pretty sort of successful process going forward. I may have just jinxed myself.
What verb did we decide to substitute for hold?
Attend.
Attend.
Okay. In priority 7, I think it's probably unreasonable to think that the SU committee is going to be able to come back to us by December, at the end of the year.
I think so.
So I would just take, which will make a report out.
And we should provide you the report that we did, I think it was last summer, when we recommended to the legislators about the whole SU thing piece too. So that might be helpful.
Get it to community members, I would think that
Yeah.
would. Yeah. Is that what you
Carol,
sent me already,
One from
Carol?
a couple summers ago?
Right, and I read it all faithfully, of course, underlined it. and
Starting with the
everything.
1964 Rutland Herald.
How did you happen to have all that information in one place? Did you pull it up in different places? My
Oh,
God.
please, have you seen her area?
Well, maybe, I think I still have it, so maybe I ought to send that to you.
I can find the said email and forward it.
Okay. Anything else on priorities?
Priority 7, should we say anything about this taking a school independent in the priority statement?
Who's moaning
It
out
would
there?
fit under 7.
What would we say?
Well, I think our position, we haven't had this discussion since last year, but we were pretty much opposed to this, making a public school an independent school and taking democratic governance away. And I would think that we would follow up on what we did last year.
Well, as I said earlier, if nothing else, we need language that sets the criteria for doing that.
So is it something like support policy which requires democratic governance for all schools?
That works for me, but it kind of leads, doesn't it?
Kind of
I
what?
think,
It's leading, but I don't mind leading there.
I think personally, I'd rather wait until it came up. I would not like to start a fight with whoever on this.
I think the other thing that maybe along with this, maybe different, is we need to review the rules for independent school approval. That may be the place to
Yeah.
start.
Yes, well, that's what I was saying
Well,
earlier.
maybe we can
yeah.
add that.
In fact, during that whole discussion, there was discussion, which, I really hate bringing this up, but one of the things that came up was the need for financial documentation of how the school will run. And what the agency had always relied on before was the number of students that they had, well, the only thing they relied on was the Win Hall School that said they had X amount of students. It also talked about previous audited accounts and certified this, and in the North Bennington packet of information, they had none of that. They had only that they anticipated X amount of students.
Which equaled X number of dollars per student, which
Right,
equaled.
but they don't, they were anticipating.
No,
They
I
had
know, no, yes.
They had no, there had no proof of a bank account. I mean, I think we could actually adhere, we could go through the rulemaking process to make it more clear and defined what is expected of an independent school.
So review the rules for independent school approval?
Correct. Well, that'll certainly get a red flag.
Oh, man.
But that's what we're doing.
Read it again?
Review the rules for independent school approval.
Well, yeah, no, you can't do that.
Why
I don't-
not?
Well, because the Independent School Association, I mean, I take the position anyway, I mean, there's some pretty neat independent schools in Vermont that contribute to our system. They're gonna read that as, and I think what we're talking about is the situation when a public school goes independent. The way, literally, you read that, that's all independent schools. And that's gonna raise all kinds of red flags.
How about just review when a public school closes and turns into a private, the rules on that?
Carol's got something to say. I want to follow up, but before I do, Chris, she probably has more.
Is that something that is going to come out of that study?
Who knows?
Would you wait for that committee?
The secretary's writing that study. I think I know where he's coming out, but.
But I do think that, forgetting about this for a second, if you look at our independent school approval process, just forgetting about, I think it's been years, I can't tell you.
Okay, okay.
Like decades since it's probably been reviewed. So I think, and it's not an indictment against independent schools or anything. It's just, it's time to review rules after probably a decade or two.
So review the rules for the independent school approval process.
How about we go initial independent school approval process?
No, leave it.
No?
Review the rules for
Leave it?
When's your report?
It has to be done
December 15th.
December 15th. He's gonna wait till January 20th to hand it in?
Everyone comfortable on the independent schools, Stacy?
Well, I mean, having worked and run an independent school for many years, right, I mean, I think my heart is pounding just hearing some of that language, right, because a lot of it had to do with, trying to prove that the school met standards that the school by mission didn't merit anyway. Does that make sense? So I guess I'm wondering if as a board, we think we really are concerned that the independent schools are not meeting the needs of our kids, then I think maybe that's going in the right direction. But if that's not our main objective, then I wonder if that statement is gonna drum up a whole lot of concern that maybe we don't have the time or the energy to
That's
address.
what concerns me.
Yeah.
And, I mean, under the existing law, if there was to be another situation where a public school closed and they were gonna go independent, we're right there. I mean, they don't do that until this board approves it.
Right, I have a totally different feeling about that than I wanna start a Montessori school in my backyard
Right.
sort of thing.
But I think you pick a fight that we don't need right now by putting something in, but that's,
So we're not putting that.
well,
in
wait a minute,
those
that's
things.
just one person. Lachlan?
I mean, I think it struck me that, like, we have the people, in my time on the board, we've had the independent schools coming for reapproval or approval, whatever, and it's kind of consent agenda type thing.
Right.
I think the first, 3 meetings I was on the board was all North Bennington stuff. It was very, it was pretty intense. If you Google, if you do a Google search, you can find a manual on how to turn your public school private in Vermont. Which is, I think it's out there, like we talked about a while back, that this is a pretty fluid situation and that we'll probably, there's a solid chance we'll get more towns trying to do this. So maybe we should try and, convey how we feel, that we don't want public schools closing and turning into private schools. I mean, I get politically that it's not very tenable, but
The hook on this is the rules, right?
That's
This is
right,
not.
Bill, that's right.
It's in the rules, and it's a state board rules.
That's right.
Perhaps we could look at reviewing the rules for taking a public school private as they apply to taking a public school private.
Review our own rules, that's a good priority.
Yeah, and can I just ask Bill
Yeah.
Talbot a question? Bill, we've been talking about this internally now for about 2 years, looking at our rules for independent school approval, not with anything of not allowing it or not supporting them or not recognizing the value, but just, it's probably time to review the rules. And is that,
I think the law that created recognized independent schools, the system we now have, the statute and the rules we follow was passed in the early 90s. I was on the Ed committee when this was talked about, and so it had to have been like 90 or 91, so it's been a while.
so talking about 2 decades or more that, so again, it's just reviewing, maybe nothing changes, but we do have some, I think there's some questions that we have about the financial stability and some of the other things that would need to be discussed. Whether they change or not is another story.
In fact, you know, they'll put up their credit card, they'll look, I mean, so there is, it's not just one or the other, it's all of it. The other thing is that aside from the school itself, there were rules, I don't know if they fall in rules or policy or AOE or here, but we had a lot of visitors when Armando was very specific about the timeline where you could apply for like homeschools. I mean, there's things that have to come up periodically that you just want to review, and we may want to say that every 10 years things need to be reviewed as a policy in looking at our rules so that things don't go 20 years without,
That's a good point.
you know, something being
And then we can be
reviewed.
proactive.
So what do you?
So what I'm proposing under, I guess, under the governance system is that as a board, we review our rules to keep them up to date with the current times, or,
As a school board member locally, it's usually every 5 years that you guys, you review policy every 5 years. So whatever, I think a number, whatever the number is probably the appropriate way of proceeding.
So we would sort of have an annual plan and look at which ones we would review on a yearly basis over a period of time, because there perhaps would only be, like, they might all cluster and we wouldn't want that. So we'd want to develop a plan so that each year we reviewed X number of rules and then the next year, so it constantly revolved. Is that?
And that way we don't get, it'd be problematic if it was every 10, it could be, if it was every 10 years, then no one on the board would have ever done it before, and there's,
So not put the other previous things we've talked about,
that would
but
be the
add
5.
review rules to keep them current on a rotating basis.
Well said.
Okay. One of the things that I am nervous about, and it's somewhat to do with what you spoke earlier about, Armando, is as federal accountability and curriculum assessment issues are pushed down, that is also impetus for some Vermont communities saying, we want to go it alone and get out of all this stuff. So that's why I think it's important that we make standards Vermont standards, that we have broad buy-in on those standards, and that we have community conversations on multiple levels, and we represent Vermont to the feds as much as doing as we're told. So it sort of speaks to what Bill was saying earlier. We represent Vermont children, Vermont families, Vermont communities, and it's incumbent on us to inform the feds about that, as it is to do as what they're telling us we're supposed to do.
So I would suggest, given the number of changes that we've made here today, that we ask Margaret to stay with us one more time, do some redrafting. We'll take up, what is it, number 9 or number 10?
Number 9.
Number 9 at the
Let's not
October
get
meeting.
to 10.
Poor Margaret.
I'm happy to. Thank
Is
you.
is that, or do you want to vote on it today?
I was just, again,
Following the earlier discussion, we were gonna have the board,
Oh, yes.
discussion around the board, and then maybe vote on it after that, if it seems still pertinent.
Okay. Okay, so I'll leave that question, all right. Anything else on this agenda? If not, let's spend just a few minutes and talk about our October meeting, and then we'll take a brief recess, and then go into executive session and send everyone else back to work.